Hello and welcome back to Ready Steady Podcast. This is episode 25 of a podcast where me and my co-host Barry talk about board games.
And I am pleased to be back. Thank you, Mike.
Yep, Barry is here because he's the most qualified individual to talk about board games with me on this show.
Doesn't sound right, but I'll fill in until somebody that can do it gets here.
So we've got, as usual, the news. We're going to cover the news, the headlines that have picked up our interest. And actually, I've lied already. Two of these I just included because I saw them. And then I'll talk about the games. We're going to talk about the games we've been playing after that. I'm going to cover the stuff I played at the Airecon convention a few weeks ago. And Barry will talk about the stuff he's been playing on BGA.
Not so much BJ this week. A lot of real life games.
Good stuff. That's what we like to hear. But very first, in case you somehow missed it, if you listen to the podcast, you will have been following the ongoing saga of my epic Elder Scrolls series. Of course you will. You're very excited about it. Part 2 just came out last week or 2 weeks ago, just before Airecon. So check out that if you haven't yet. Check out Part 1 if you haven't yet. Part 3 coming very soon. I've already filmed it, so it's all filmed, and it just wants a bit of editing. So, on to the news. The top headline. This is it. The big news that got everyone's attention. Everyone's talking about it. Barry, what is it?
That is true. It is a new edition of Quacks of Quedlingburg, now just called Quacks, which is fine because everybody just called it Quacks anyway.
This is true.
But the so this is published now. Who's the new publisher?
CYMK, isn't it?
Yeah. That's correct. I don't know what else they've published. I didn't actually have a look. But
they famously did. I'm thinking of. I'm going to say Lacuna. It might be wrong. The 2-player sort of positional abstract game, and Spots. The game about placing dice on your dogs.
Spots is a good game. But the big thing that everybody's been talking about is not that you can now get an up-to-date version or an all-in edition with both expansions and the sort of Bakelite style pieces for drawing out of the bag for that nice game feel. It is the art on the cover. Quite divisive.
Yeah, it has been. Just before we move into the art discussion, I know this is still designed by Wolfgang Vorsch. Do you know have they promised any new content as part of this reissue? Do you know?
Not that I'm aware of, and I don't think it includes the Wolfgang expansion. Let me see if I can just find what I'm talking about there. Wolfgang's Exchange Office.
Oh, interesting. So the all-in edition doesn't include that?
I don't think so, but I could be wrong. Please.
So how many expansions are there? I thought there were just 2.
Yes, there's only really 2. So there's the Herb Witches and the Alchemist. Both of those are in there, reprinted as far as I'm aware. There was one micro expansion promo in the 2018 goodie box that they issued, which is just another place to kind of move your droplet on test tubes. Now, I don't know if that's similar to what they ended up doing in Alchemists or not necessarily, but I think it is quite different because it's mostly points and it's not been republished in this version, as far as I can tell.
Okay, so as far as we're aware, it's largely the same game, and it has had a big box edition before as well, hasn't it, with the 2 expansions?
And the big box was unnecessarily big, fits in the small box just fine. I see here that they're including the 6 pumpkin as part of base Quacks. Alright, sure, not a big change.
So the biggest change, of course, is the name and the art style. The artist of the originals, who was the artist of the original?
Dennis Lohausen, I think.
Do we know what they've done?
Yeah, Ark Nova, Gaia Project, Feast for Odin, Terra Mystica, Fields of Arl.
Right, so they're so Fields of Arl, I feel like that's the same sort of style that it's a very sort of, it feels like a sort of a traditional German Eurogame style, doesn't it? It sort of presents that way. I'm actually surprised to hear it's the same artist who did Arc Nova, because that feels very different to those others.
I mean, I'm not saying necessarily they did the front cover, but the weird filter they put on it is the.
Yeah, I mean, Arc Nova, of course, has very sort of traditional Eurogame iconography, I suppose, and traditionally there's been quite a lot of overlap between board game artist and board game graphic designer. Lately, they've been doing a more fastidious job of distinguishing the roles, but traditionally, it's often been the same role, particularly in the case of Franz Clemens, who did a lot of those early Euro games as well. So here, what we've got is a pivot away from that style, from that sort of traditional classic Euro style, to a very contemporary style, or at least not contemporary, but unique and specific. Ryogo Toyoda, a Japanese artist who is known for claymation style 3D images. That comes from their BGG page. As far as I can tell, they've only done this game, but they do have an Instagram up with lots of this art style, and they have lots of cool images on there as well. But this has been quite divisive, hasn't it?
Yes, a lot of people don't like it. I mean, we've discussed AI art in the past, and the amount of people calling this out as AI when it's clearly not. It's just a style they A, probably don't like very much, and B, is computer generated, right? It's computer generated, designed to look like clay, as you mentioned. I think there's other things wrong with the cover beyond the actual style. The style I quite like. I don't necessarily like it for this board game, or potentially any board game. But I do like the style in general. They're not good covers. And there's 2 different covers worth noting, or 3 different covers, in fact. The all-in version is its own one. The base game seems to have 2 covers, with the sort of blue wizard and the orange witch. I'm not sure which one's which, like what it's on. So normal one, blue wizard, deluxe edition, orange witch, all in, purple, everybody round the pole.
It's not especially hard to find the different covers, but they have they've renamed the BGG page Quacks. So it's no longer Quacks of Quedlinburg on BGG, it's just Quacks. And the art they've put up there is the core game, but if you go into editions, you can find the art for the all-in box as well. It's not hidden. So I can understand like people's reactions, and there's quite a big board game group on Facebook called Board Game Revolution, and their admins did a poll of people around the art, and it came back 90% didn't like it, which I think, it's not because it's bad. It's really nicely done, but I can appreciate. So I'm not a big fan either, despite the fact I actually really like the art, and on certain games, I think it'd be really fitting. It's got a really sort of like twee, almost like cozy adventure look. And I think on some things it could be really fun and appropriate. The reason I don't like it for Quacks, and this is just hugely subjective, is there was something I thought really humorous in the fact that the original Quacks it's just a really light, random push your luck game, and it presented like it was a serious Euro game, which I thought was really funny. And that's it. That's the only reason.
I certainly think there's a degree of the quackery is more evident on the original cover compared to the new one, where it just looks like a wizard or a witch.
Yeah,
perhaps I was mixing the potion incorrectly. It doesn't get across that they're deliberately selling you dodgy potions.
I was going to raise the exact same thing as well. The cover art does look like sort of I mean, the cover art for the All-In edition actually makes it look like a cooperative game because they're all working on one potion, which is inaccurate. But the other thing is they all look sort of surprised and alarmed by what they're doing, which is kind of the opposite of a quack, I suppose. A quack is essentially a snake oil salesman, right?
Yeah.
You know, and so it's really is a game of dodgy marketing more than anything. And I suppose thematically, when you're pulling out the bag and placing the pieces in the potion, what you're trying to do is create something that's, you know, the push your luck element is the gamble between creating something that's reasonably convincing to your audience and yet that doesn't, you know, tip them off and they come and get you, lynch you as a mob, you know, for being a rip-off artist.
I mean, the theme is somewhat tenuous anyway, but...
Yeah, that's fair. That's completely fair. And the ingredients all have their own little effects, and it's kind of like, well, why? They're largely vegetables anyway. But you know, I think as a marketing thing, it's kind of interesting, right? Because there is a question about like, who is this for? Quacks has become a very beloved game. I have not played it much since it came out, to be honest. I played it 3 or 4 times when it came out. I really enjoyed it, but I never felt the need to own it. But you know, and you know, I never had my own copy, and that's fine. But like, I can see how it's really. I can understand why. It's really. It's been very, very popular, and you can see that it's really popular across the spectrum as well, because there's not a lot of people who are into sort of super light accessible games who would go out and spend a huge amount of money on Geek Up bits on BGG. But this has all of its tokens available as Geek Up bits, right? So it just goes to show there's a lot of love in the community for it. And I think you have it as well, right? You've kept your copy.
Yeah, so I have the base game and the expansions. That's probably my most blinged out version of the game. I have proper wooden containers for everything that you can put the ingredient cards on. I have the Geek Up bits. I have upgraded bags. Everything's sleeved and in its proper place.
So when you play it with the kiddies, they won't get chocolate on
it. No.
So this is, this looks like it's sort of been made to appeal to a younger audience and get a younger audience engaged with it. I don't know if Quacks has had that problem. So I don't know if it necessarily needed a rebrand. And part of me wonders if this is just because obviously you can't copyright game mechanisms. Part of me wonders if this that's the word I'm looking for. Bear with me.
Implementation?
Part of me wonders if the repaint of the game was a legal thing. Like when CYMK got the rights to redistribute it, they were under obligation to repaint the whole thing.
I mean, I guess in part it could be that they couldn't purchase the art with it, but more than likely, it seems, I don't know. We don't know what's going on behind the scenes in terms of what the licensing agreement was. It could be that Kramer got the rights to the game back because they couldn't negotiate a new deal or whatever, but he wouldn't have had any of the rights to the arts because that would have been the publisher. And then he's shopped the game round to CMYK, who have obviously had to redo the art.
Not Wolfgang Kramer, Wolfgang Warsch.
Warsch, yeah. Wolfgang.
One of the Wolfgangs.
Yeah. It'd be a very different game if Wolfgang Kramer made it, I think.
Yeah.
That could be something that's happened, we don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Or it could just be they thought, well, everybody that was going to buy Quacks has bought Quacks. We need to do something different to reach a different audience. Could just be more. I
think that's probably very accurate as well. Just sort of marketing. And for what it's worth, I do really like the art. I'm just not sure if I like it for this, or rather some of the juxtaposition of the original art and the nature of the game and the comedic value therein is lost. And that's a shame. But if you said this is a a family RPG, an accessible family RPG. You know, like what's it called? Chronicles of Avil, I think. Is that what it's called? You know the one I mean, where you keep things in your little backpack. The people know what I'm talking about. This kind of art would really suit that sort of thing. That I could get behind that.
All right, all right. Fine. Well, that's the first and probably most interesting piece of news, but not the only thing that's happened or that we've seen. What's been the most interesting new development that you've discovered?
Well, there's nothing here that sort of has got me chomping at the bit with excitement, but I mean, I'm sorry. Let me try that again. Oh boy, Barry, I'm excited for new games. Are you excited for more games? Here we go. All right.
We hate games around here.
We hate board games. Right. No, it's compile main 2 and aux 2. That's fun. That's coming out in September this year. It is basically what you've already seen, that amount of content again. So 18 new protocols that you can completely mix and match with part 1. And that's it.
Nice. I've still not played it. Do want to play it.
You were supposed to play it last week. What happened?
Didn't get a chance. Too many people. Alas, compile only goes 2 players. So
Barry's got too many friends.
Got too many friends.
I do think there are enough protocols in main 1 to do 2 games simultaneously. Maybe even at least 2.
3. Yeah. Is there not 18? So you could probably get 3 games going.
Yeah. I don't know if the 18 includes aux, but
right.
But yeah, so you could get at least 2, maybe 3 games on the go simultaneously. And then once you've got all of them, you can have 4 to 6 games on the go. 12-player compile tournament.
Nice. Well, the biggest news, I wouldn't necessarily say something one I'm most excited for, but I would say the biggest news that I've seen this week is Sanctuary, or Artengarten, as the image is up at the moment. And this is, I don't know if it's a re-implementation of Arc Nova so much as a slight reimagining. The description says it's based on its predecessor, Arc Nova, but modifies and simplifies many of the mechanisms of that game in an elegant and surprising manner. Right, sure. So this is the sequel to some degree to Arc Nova. Don't know a huge amount about it. I know you've only got 4 cards instead of, I think you get 5 cards in Arc Nova to manage your gameplay. And again, depending on what slot those cards are in, that's going to determine how strong that action is. So I'm assuming they're keeping that same mechanism for the longer you delay doing something, the more powerful it is. It does seem, however, that in this game, all the tiles are uniform hexagonal tiles, and you're still trying to build a zoo. So a lot of similarities there. Now, I was never a big fan.
You're trying to build a zoo?
You're trying to build a zoo?
I would have thought you were trying to build an animal sanctuary.
For Sanctuary, yeah. Well, I mean, scientifically managed zoo for animals and visitors. Make of that what you will. Is a scientifically managed zoo a sanctuary? Maybe.
Well, sure, but I feel like an animal sanctuary is a specific thing.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry to interrupt you. You're not a fan of zoo.
I'm not a fan of Arc Nova. I'm not a fan of animals. No, I'm not a fan of Arc Nova.
I'm not a fan of zoo.
So whether or not this will appeal to me, I do like the base mechanism of using your actions. The longer you leave it, it gets closer to the right hand side where it's maybe more powerful. I played a few games of Civilization, which was the first time I came across that particular mechanism.
If you'd like to see how Civilization works, you can find a whole series on the channel where we play it 2-player.
Mm-hmm.
Not me and Barry, but
no,
me and Michael, but it's there.
Although I've not played Civilization since we played that last game with the expansion.
Yeah, I've not played the expansion. I've heard it's really good.
Well, we felt military kind of broke on that one, but
Well, it doesn't matter because it's wildly out of print. So unless you can pick it up on the secondhand market, then too bad.
You don't need it. So anyway, yes, that's big. Obviously, Arc Nova now the number 4? Still number 4?
Is it?
3. Number 3 on the board game rankings for all-time best games.
Wow.
And so any kind of follow-up is going to be heavily scrutinised and potentially well enjoyed.
Well, it sounds like here what they're doing is they're just because I mean, Arc Nova has a reasonable amount going on. I'm not sure what its actual weight is, but I suspect it's probably heavier than it seems if you're 3.78. So I feel like it's probably heavier than it seems if you're quite across the hobby, because there's not really any mechanisms in Arc Nova that aren't familiar. There's just a lot of them. I enjoy Arc Nova more than you. I enjoy it as a puzzle. You know, the big criticism I think a lot of people have of Arc Nova is that there's too many cards and it's too difficult to go in with a specific strategy that you're trying to realize. Completely legitimate criticism, absolutely fair. The expansion only adds more cards, so that just becomes more of a problem. I don't mind that really, but I also don't play Arc Nova that often, and I never play it with more than one other person, and I don't think I would. It just doesn't appeal to me as a 4-player game. But I do see people playing it at 3 and 4 players. So
I've only played it at 4, so maybe that's part of the issue.
Yeah, I think as a sort of a 2-player sort of tableau, just sort of puzzly tableau buildery, I find the geometric puzzle of actually laying out the zoo quite compelling as well. So there's a lot there to like, and I think a sort of a satisfying mix of mechanisms. But I appreciate that it really is a very solitary affair. It's very difficult to manage, it's very difficult to min-max as well. If you're the kind of player that really wants to improve their gameplay every time they play, I suspect you'll hit a ceiling with this that's quite low. And that's because of the randomized deck, you know, and you will potentially play your best game is your first game just because you got an incredible flop of cards. And then your further games, you'll just be trying to max out a better score and unable to do so. That said, you know, there is a number of things you can sort of get better at, but it's all your standard Euro stuff. So like keep the objectives in mind, try to synchronize objectives where there's, you know, criteria that are overlapping, you know, that kind of stuff, just basic things. So yeah, but there is something pleasing about building a nice zoo. And for what it's worth, I've played a number of games about building a zoo, and I thought this was the best one.
That's fair. I've not played any. I played New York Zoo. Is that a game?
Yep, that's a game. I played that too. I thought it was horribly dry. Yep,
and I now own. I think I mentioned this in the very first ever episode. The game Wildlife, from 1966, which is a roll and move around the world collecting animals. I've not played it again since I've obtained it. Smells very much of, to be generous, old game, but potentially worse. And I'm sure I've played some others.
Well, I think they did Zoo Tycoon, the board game, which I haven't actually played. It looked a lot. So I haven't actually tried that. The other, so I'm not counting Zularetto.
Zularetto was okay. Yeah.
Yeah, it's also very different and not really thematic.
What about Dinogenics or Welcome to Dino World or?
Does Jurassic Park count as a zoo? Let's not get into that. Anyway, Sanctuary, for those that wanted a lighter, more accessible version of Arc Nova, I guess, doesn't really excite me that much, to be honest. But I will be interested to see if by streamlined they mean we took out what felt like bloat. And so that would be interesting. But if they're like, no, we've just basically hacked off some of the mechanisms to make it a lower weight complexity, then it's not really interesting to me.
Remains to be seen.
And speaking on the topic of games coming back around again, this is not a streamlining, really. This is just Tokaido revisited from Stonemaier Games. You like Tokaido, Barry?
I don't hate it. I played it quite a lot, actually. Like, I've got the app. I played through the app a couple of dozen times. I've played it on Board Game Arena. Again, 3, 4, 5 times. I played it in real life a couple of times. Didn't play Duo. I don't hate it. It's just not a lot there that makes me want to come back to it. I mean, having played it so much, you might think, of course, you've seen it all. But actually, even after your first game, there's not a lot extra
there's
there.
not a lot of discovery in Tokaido.
Yes. It's just something nice. You can sit down with anybody will play with you if they're just looking for a way of passing the time, because it's super easy to teach. And the app just whizzes by a little faster than requiring other people to make their decisions. So yes, it's fine. I'm not in love with it.
Yeah, I kind of had the same sort of opinion. I've not played the app. I've only played Tokaido 2 or 3 times in real life. I've also played the successor / follow-up, Namiji, which I really didn't rate at all. We played it at Essen, actually, I think about a year before it was delivered to backers, but it was functionally the final game. But, Tokaido is just, what we can describe as a very pleasant game. It's just a pleasant tour of Japan. And, you're doing paintings, which is just set collection, and I can't remember what else you're doing. I think you're visiting tea houses and collecting tea tokens, which is just set collection.
Your paintings, your items, your food. You're donating the most to shrines. You're gathering wanderers.
Oh, the shrine donations, yeah. But don't you get like a gift back from the shrine when you donate? And that's
and if you donated the least at the end, you're out kind of deal. And
yeah, so it's functionally like a series of action spaces that are these very pleasant little things you can do in Japan, but they're all just slight variations of set collection. And what makes the game sort of, a game is that we're all moving along the same track to the end, and the player who's at the back always acts first. And that means that you could functionally act a couple of times if you don't step too far forward on the track. But you might be inclined to race down the track because you really want to get into one of these spots first and have first choice of the set collection. So it's sort of balancing, your desire to have first pick with your desire to have multiple actions. And, it's not an unpleasant mechanic. It's gives the game a bit of tension, I suppose. But, it is very light and very simple and has a pleasing presentation.
Whilst slightly different games, I would say for a comparable feel for me, but like a level up, is River of Gold, which we've spoken about. The moving along the river gives me comparable feeling. I appreciate they are different games. One's slightly more gamery than the other.
Yeah, and I can see why you would make the comparison. And I do think what jumps out about Tokaido as its sort of core thing is this idea that you can go twice if you go last and stay last. In River of Gold, that's not present. You just take turns. But also in Tokaido, I don't actually know how consequential that really is. It doesn't feel like, a sort of an incredibly competitive game. Tokaido, it just feels like sort of more like a pleasant activity with some scoring at the end. Stonemaier is doing a new version of it. They've never published it before, so this is a whole new thing. It doesn't look to be massively different artistically. There's not much out at the moment, just sort of the box, but it looked like they're keeping a similar style, which was these sort of pleasant images of Japan and Japanese cultural things that appear in the game against a sort of a white void backdrop. So you got a very sort of minimalist graphical interface with these art pieces popping on it. That's the original style. It looks like they've kind of kept that. It goes 1 to 5. I think that's one more than the original had. And they've put a solo mode in as well. which is also available separately and apparently backwards compatible.
Nice. I mean, yeah, if you like it.
Yeah, according to Stonemaier as well, they do have quite a high production value in their games, and I think that's true. And they will apparently be applying that to this new versions. Well, there was a Tokaido Duel as well, which I also played, which wasn't bad, but it's functionally just like a head-to-head tug of war thing. It's not really the same as the other two. And Namiji's very similar to Tokaido. You're just going on a tour around the board. It has the exact same movement system. It's just that the mini games have changed, and for whatever reason, it felt longer and less interesting.
Nice. New games then. Let's have a look at what's coming out. Pond. Now, I've spoken about Pond on the show before. This is a different Pond, unrelated to the 2-player abstract game available on Board Game Arena. This is currently on BackerKit, a project from Brother Ming Games. They have done some stuff before, I forget what, but this is a very cutesy looking game. It is a deck building area control game, combining many things that people like. The deck building with an additional function, very cute meeples. I'd say they even potentially surpass Root in terms of how cute their little meeples are, but they are all frogs. And different kinds of frogs, whether that is a cowboy frog, a wizard frog, or a banana frog, or the anarchy frog with his lighter ready to set the world alight.
There's a frog card here, and the frog is, I don't know if it's, I can't read the text. If it might say beefy frog or Chad frog, but the frog is an 8-pack. Swole frog?
Swole frog, yeah. He is big boy. And the game is, it looks like it could be quite good. There's different areas of the pond. You play your cards, either for their money value or for the effect on them. You move out from your tall fwog. That's not a lisp, by the way, it's a fwog. You move out from your tall fwogs to different areas on the board, try and control them. If you have a majority by 2, you control that frog and you get a that pond, you get a lily pad. And other frogs, you can play cards to attack or upgrade into new stations, new fwogs, where you can spawn more frogs at that point. And it looks interesting enough. There is a version on Tabletop Simulator, and it's going to be updated in the next couple of days. I'm going to give it a go because it is a potential buy, as long as it's relatively cutthroat, despite the cutesy looking pieces of the game. And they have a number of internet artists contributing the art to the cards. If you follow any frog-based Instagram artists, you'll probably recognise some of the frogs on the card. There's at least 20 different artists contributing to the game. The only thing I don't like is that there are a handful of promo cards that are locked behind backing other games on BackerKit. And there's no way to just pay the difference to get them. So in order to get 7 of the promos, I would have to back 3 additional games.
Yeah, I gotta say I'm not a big fan of that either.
Yeah, and so I did message the whoever's running the project, asked, is there any way to get the promos without backing the other games? And they were like, no, it's a cross-promotional thing. It's like, well, yeah, but I don't want the other games. And now I don't want your game. So make of that what you will.
Well, we do know you are something of a gameplay completionist.
Correct.
But I do appreciate that. And actually, I've said before, and I know Chris, who collaborates on the show with me, agrees with this, is that we're really not fans of when gameplay is Kickstarter exclusive or crowdfunding exclusive, or gameplay for the part, maybe even an expansion for the game is gate kept behind another project or as part of another project. We like publishers to make gameplay stuff always accessible in some form, you know?
Mhm.
And so, I think while I'm not a big fan of a lot of Stonemaier games, I'm a big fan that they're making the solo mode they're adding to Tokaido backwards compatible and available separately for everyone who already owns Tokaido. I think that's great. And that's the example that every other publisher should be looking to. So yeah, not a fan. If you want to do a cross-promotional thing like this, that's fine. We've seen this sort of thing done before. Have the other games get their artists to do your cards like in their style, right? So you have like just the same promo cards that are available with your campaign, but with different art styles or something like that, and a nice little thing to have, but not actual gameplay.
Agreed. So anyway, I'll keep an eye on that. It should still be available on BackerKit when people are watching or listening to this. And it should be available for testing on Tabletop Simulator from the publisher by the time you hear this.
Yeah, I just can't imagine anyone out there who's like, oh, hooray, I only wanted this one game, but now thank God I've got an excuse to buy 3 games.
Yeah, 4.
In
fact, two of the promos are behind having already backed one of their games before. And it's like, well, so like, I can't go back in time.
I'm also not... I also actually think it's really nice and really good to reward previous backers. I remember, for example, the Everdell campaigns where they kept making more expansions for Everdell, and every time they'd run a new Everdell campaign, they'd offer all of the previous campaigns rewards at a big discount, and it did feel a bit like they'd sort of got what they wanted from backers of the earlier campaigns, and now they were done with you and they didn't really have anything to offer. So again, try to dream up something you can offer your loyal backers who've supported your work in the past. If you're going to offer the products they bought at a discounted rate, then try to think of something you can offer them, like maybe some credit for the pledge manager or alt art things that you can only get if you backed before. Again, not gameplay, but something, people like alt art stuff, or like, there's all kinds of stuff you can dream up. I can think of tons of things off the top of my head, and I'm not even in this. So, anyway, it's cute. I'd definitely try it. So we can play that on BJ, and we'll come back in the future. Although by then I think it will be done. It looks like there's 10 days left, so you will only have a few days to back it. But
I'm sure it will be available.
Late pledge, yeah. I'm sure there'll be a late pledge. So we'll get a game in. We'll let you know.
Last one for me is a new board game, not yet up to back on crowdfunding, but it is Tekken, so the Namco Bandai video game series. What's it called? Fighting. What do you call a fighting game?
Beat 'em up.
Is it just called a fighting game? Beat 'em up. That's the word. So this is published by Go On Board, and they're the guys behind Cyberpunk 2077 and The Witcher Old World. So the game, there's not a huge amount of details up. You can see some of the cards, you can see the miniatures. They've gone for some quite chunky miniatures. The game says that it's going to play between between 1 and 8 players. So it can't just be a head-to-head fighter in the same way maybe something like Yomi is, or the Street Fighter miniature fighting game. In fact, I still don't even know if that is a 2-player game. Might go up to more. But it doesn't seem to be related to any existing miniature fighting game that's out there yet. But quite interesting just how to implement the beat 'em up genre into, which is a reflex based, a knowledge based combo system, typically into a board game, set of board game mechanisms that work. And particularly if you're going up to 8 players, I'm going to assume that it doesn't go any higher than 4, and there's some sort of tag team element, since tagging
it says here you either face off in an intense one-on-one duel, there's a solo fight mode, or you join the Iron Fist tournament, which holds up to 8 players. So I imagine it's a series of 1v1s.
Yeah.
for 8, like a round, like a.
Yeah, so probably 8 players is a stretch, but
No, I imagine it's like 4 simultaneous games, right?
possibly if they give you enough boards for it, because it certainly does seem to rely on board positioning. Oh, the stages. I guess the stages maybe aren't that big, so yeah, okay, fine.
Well, I'm looking at the stage here, and it looks like a hex map, a top-down hex map.
Yeah.
Which is, I mean, I've not played Tekken since Tekken Tag, which I believe was on PS2 or 3.
Yep.
So, it is, in my recollection, a Mortal Kombat style 2D fighting game rather than a Soul Calibur style 3D fighting game where you can move left and right around the arena in addition to forward and back.
All fighting games are in the third dimension to some degree now. But actually, saying that, no, the new Street Fighters and stuff aren't, I suppose.
Street Fighter never got the third dimension, as far as I'm aware.
Are we just ignoring Street Fighter EX? And
to be fair, do you know what? I've never heard of that. So I said, as far as I'm aware, and it turns out my awareness is very limited.
It was terrible. So you're right to pretend it doesn't exist. Anyway, could be interesting. I don't know a huge amount about it. There is a free Angel Jin character if you sign up early, so you can jump on that and I'll see what the game itself looks like, as I don't actually have any fighting games in this style on my shelves.
I never really got into fighting game or beat 'em ups or fighting games when I was into video games. I'm still into video games. I just don't have time to play them anymore. You know, I grew up and got a job and it's sad. But we won't talk about that. The point is, when I did play video games a lot, I'd play games like Tekken or Street Fighter, but I was never any good at them because fundamentally it came down to learning a moveset, and I just didn't want to do that. Like, I just didn't want to memorize button combos and stuff like that. And you have to learn like all the characters if you want to be really good at it, because you need to know what other characters are capable of and what your advantages are and what their advantages are, so you can counter them. And some people love that. And I can totally understand the appeal of it, like memorizing all these different sort of characters and their strengths and weaknesses and movesets. And then, you know, basically being asked to recall and manifest that information in excruciating fast real time. I get the appeal. I was never good at it, and I never got past sort of button mashing and figuring out like one cool thing that I could do. You know, the minute the character did like a cool thing, I just mashed that over and over again, even if it wasn't effective. So it's not really my genre. And a lot of the board games that have manifested this style will like zone in on that memory game aspect, right? Like learning the characters, learning their movesets. So it'll be things like decks of cards that control their moves and abilities and things like that. For me, the sort of the manifestation of this that I've played the most is the Indines series from Level 99, which consists of a number of games that are something of Indines. I have the Devastation of Indines, which is one game in the series. I can't tell you what distinguishes it from the others or how much of Indines it actually includes. There's enough in there for me. For sure. And I've played it a few times and I've reasonably enjoyed it. It demands that, you know, and it captures the sense of a fighting game when I play it with someone who's never played it before, and I might as well have never played it before. We're both spend the first sort of round of the game just playing cards at random and desperately trying to remember what other people's cards do and what our cards do. So then in like fight 2, you know, someone will win that. And then in fight 2, because, you know, it's always best of 3, right? We will then be trying to remember what is in each other's decks and what cards are playing out. I think if you know anything of Level 99 as a publisher, you know that they tend to put out quite complex and demanding games. And Indines is no exception. It has a lot going on and there's a lot to try and remember. It's quite difficult to get to the table, just in terms of sort of it's not like a massive amount of rules overhead, but it's very specific and you have to be quite across the rules because it's not a game you can just casually bring out. So the closest thing to sort of like a casual fighting game I have is probably so the closest thing is Dice Throne, right? Which works for me because it is just random and I don't have to remember move sets, and the 6 moves you can do are just printed in front of you. But that doesn't have like a physical manifestation of the fighters, which I think is quite important for some people in these sorts of things. So like Devastation of Indines does. It's a back and forth. Other games that spring to mind in this sort of genre are Knockdown, which was an Awaken Realms light game in which 2 characters are sort of on a grid moving back and forth towards each other. It's very, very similar. Conceptually, it's a deck of cards that you play out that move the characters back and forth with blocks and high and low kicks and little combos and things. I think I might have covered it on the channel at some point. If I didn't do a playthrough, I definitely did a rules video, but I think I did both. But I never actually got a copy. They just sent me a prototype to look at, so I did. I think it was during lockdown as well. But so that's sort of probably the lightest and most accessible iteration of this. And then the last one I'll mention is Sakura Arms, which is a Japanese game that again is very, very similar. I think it's got and it has this anime style art, and I know that's really, really popular, but I've not actually had a chance to play it, and I think it's quite hard to find. I just know that in this genre it's popular, because I've seen it sort of get kickstarted and reprinted a bunch of times as well, and I've sort of thought about picking it up. But it's one of those games as well where they sort of keep releasing expansions in Japan, and then somebody has to go away and translate them, and that's partly what the crowdfunding's for. But then of course there's Yomi, which we talked about, which was on GameFound a month ago, the latest version. That's from David Serlin and Serlin Games, who did Codex and Puzzle Strike, but we haven't played that either, so we can't talk about it. But I mean, for me, like I've got almost, just to get back to Tekken, the board game, I'm not a big fan of Go on Board, if I'm honest. I don't know if Luke Wozniak, who designs their games, who designed Witcher the Old World, I don't know if Luke actually designed Cyberpunk 2077. I'd be surprised if he didn't, because it's his company, and he designs most of their titles. Well, I think they've only got 4 titles, but I don't know. And then Tekken, the board game, and then the first title they had was Titans, which I think is their only non-IP game. And I did back that. I played it twice. It's just fine. I think it could have been brilliant with a few small changes, but it doesn't. There's a couple of restrictions in the game that feel like they're there because otherwise it would have broken. And I think that rather than just put in a restriction that kind of feels bad and unintuitive, they should have found some other way of making that work, because there's a really interesting action system in there, and the combat system's quite fun as well. It's like a dude on the map. It's like a dudes on the map dice game where everyone's got a giant Titan unit that can kind of just stomp on things, but you've only got one, and if it dies, you're in trouble. So you have to be like sort of careful about how you use it. So it's almost like a Cold War style Risk, but then with all these little skirmishes going on between normal armies. It's good. I mean, sorry, there's a lot of good ideas in there. But then, but anyway, so I'm not the biggest fan of Go on Board overall, though, because Titans didn't really land. Witcher Old World didn't really land for me, although I know people still enjoy it. And yeah, I've not played Cyberpunk. I don't know if that's out yet.
I think enough people played it. I think certainly their games, Cyberpunk's in the 15,000, Titans at 4,000, and then Witcher Old World at top 400. So it looks like he's at least functional, pushing towards getting better. But yeah, eventually I think one of them will land.
Yeah, and I think I would be less critical of the designs if they weren't so bloated and expensive.
Yeah,
I think that's the core thing. But I know a lot of people have enjoyed Witcher the Old World, so make of that what you will. Right, my last thing, very quickly, before we move on to the played games, is just the Tainted Grail Fall of Avalon video game is approaching its official release. So there were 2 Tainted Grail video games. One of them...
Conquest.
I played, and it was like a top-down third-person game. I played that in beta a long time ago. I do not know if that became this, or if that was sort of shelved and this was always in the works as a separate thing. But this is a sort of open world Elder Scrolls, a sort of Elder Scrolls / Elden Ring version of Tainted Grail, called Tainted Grail Full of Avalon, and it's first person, and they've just released the penultimate patch, which will have been out a week when you hear this podcast, and it contains the first of 3 acts, which is apparently 20 plus hours of content. I've seen some screenshots. It looks interesting. If you like sort of first-person fantasy, grim, dark stuff, whack 'em with a sword, might be worth checking it out.
Yeah, I mean, I played Conquest. I've just gone back onto the Conquest.
Is that what it was called? Tainted Grail Conquest?
It was it wasn't the board game, but like you did wander around the different areas and you had your character, and then combat was card driven.
Yeah, so I think that's what I live streamed once when it was in beta a long time ago.
Yeah, I quite enjoyed it.
I remember, or I thought it was just called Tainted Grail. Oh no, it is Tainted Grail Conquest. But then the banner art is just from the board game. Interesting. Anyway, yeah, I didn't actually. It was very buggy when I played it, and I think that's because it was in beta, and so I have not been back to that. I also think they changed quite a few things, but this is a separate thing.
Yeah, totally different.
Totally different game, and it's they've distinguished it on Steam. There's Tainted Grail, which is the Tainted Grail Conquest we were just talking about. This is Tainted Grail: The Fall of Avalon. And yeah, you can go and check. If you liked Tainted Grail, if you liked the world and the lore, this might be something that's worth checking out. It is, as I've described, first-person adventure game.
I have no strong connection to the world of Tainted Grail.
Well, I've only played what you've seen on the channel, which is to say, the first number of hours of the campaign. But I like the world, and I like these sort of real first-person adventure games. Right, so Barry, I've been at Airecon, you've been at home, but we've both been playing board games.
Yeah, all right, rub it in. I went out, I went into the sun, went for one of my silly little walks for my stupid mental health. But otherwise, games. How was Airecon?
So I really like Airecon. I've always enjoyed Airecon. I think for me, it's because it's one of the conventions where I just sit and I play games the entire time. I still enjoyed it. There were some so one of the things it does well is that there is sort of drinks and snacks accessible, and that's good. There were some issues this year where the food trucks that they normally have, which are very good, and offer a decent selection of things, were very far away from the convention. So you had quite a long walk through the convention to get to them this time, which was disappointing. They also have a sort of an in-house culinary group who are supposed to deliver food to tables and things if you order it. We never actually tried because we couldn't get their app to work. Right. But people who did order from them also had some complaints. So I guess there were some issues with the food this year, but other than that, they had their sort of hall of publishers and exhibitors, and that was great. Just a very small thing, but you can go down there, you can mooch around, and occasionally they've got some games for sale. They've got the French group, which is, Studio H, Sorry We're French, Hachette's group. So they were there, and there's a bunch of titles there. And of course, they had Castle Combo for sale, which everyone is excited about because it's kind of the hotness right now. And then there's lots of other little things as well. So that was nice. So that's pleasant. Then there's the Bring 'em By. There's the library, which was good. There's Always Giant, Hey, That's My Fish, which I can get behind. And yeah, it was just nice. We hung out, we played a bunch of games. I will talk about 2 of the games we played in some detail, and I will honorably mention the rest and my key takeaways.
What are do you want to start with the honorable mentions, or do you want to go deep dive into the game of the con?
I'm going to save Galactic Cruise as my dramatic climax because I know a lot of people are interested in it.
Big game.
It's a big game, and I've played it. We had a tradition for playing Wonderland's War. Unfortunately, I didn't get to play that this year because the folks we played it with didn't attend. Unfortunately, they couldn't. So we did Eclipse with our other group, which was really fun. Eclipse Second Dawn with 6 players. I brought the Outcasts and Seekers expansions. So this is a giant 4X space game designed by Tokaido. The art is Noah Adelman, Yir Kassenen, Juka Ranjanimi, and Sampo Sikio. Apologies for all my pronunciation there. And the publisher is loudpellet.fi. And this is a big Space 4X game where everyone controls a civilization, and it is marginally shorter than Twilight Imperium and slightly more Euro and economic, but still with tons of random luck and dice combat. So the Outcasts and Seekers expansions just offer more playable races. They allow you to play up to 9, but we still capped it at 6 because we're not crazy. We played in this game with the Orion Hegemony, Hydrant Progress, Descendants of Draco, and Mechanima, which are all from the core game. And Mark from Not Board Gaming was playing as the Exiles, and I was playing as the Wardens of Magellan. And of course, when you play as the aliens, they're all asymmetrical. There is a human side, which is all just the same. So everyone can play as humans and be boring and the same, or you can all play as aliens and have weird powers. And the Exiles' special thing is that they get powers from orbitals. Sorry, not powers. They're orbitals, and they don't have space bases. Instead, they have orbitals that are also space bases. And if they take over other people's orbitals, they turn them into their space bases. So their space-based blueprint applies to their orbitals, which are also worth victory points for them. So their whole thing is building orbitals out the wazoo. I was the Wardens of Magellan, and my special thing was that I get to... I mean, actually, it's interesting. I have like 2 powers. One is if I get any of the ancient discoveries that you can slot into blueprints, then that's worth a point for me. So I really want to try to find those, but that's just random and totally unreliable. Although I did manage to get 2. I also start with 1 on my board, actually, which I can unlock over the course of the game. An ancient discovery. Might not be a blueprint, though. Mm-hmm. And then I believe I was lucky and it was a blueprint. But my other power, which was actually more significant, was that I could flip unused colony ships to just generate a wild resource, which was actually extremely versatile and valuable. So that was pretty cool. So they're not like super innovative, or they don't do anything super new or anything, but they are pink, and I did enjoy playing them. I enjoyed the economic versatility. But despite that, I spent the entire game pointing out that if we don't attack the strongest player at the table, they're going to win. And then everyone attacked me instead, and then the strongest player at the table won. So it is that sort of game.
I'll teach you.
It'll teach me not to say, hey, everybody go and attack the person who won the last game, who's winning this game. It seems to be the story of my Eclipse, Barry. Every time we play Eclipse, I'm like...
I'm glad you've learned your lesson.
Still not learned my lesson. Everyone's like, no, Mike's the strongest player at the table. I'm like, what are you talking about? I never win Eclipse.
And you never will.
Which is fine, because I always enjoy playing Eclipse. It is
far shorter than Twilight Imperium, but a lot of the same feel.
Yeah.
Negotiation aside.
I mean, obviously both games are going to be dependent on how across them people are and the player counts, but, all things being equal, it's probably a good 2 to 3 hours shorter than Twilight Imperium.
Good fun. Like I said, my group got rid of Eclipse for some reason. I don't know why. We always had a good time playing it. Guy that had it just thought, get rid of it. Odd. He's got loads of terrible games. I don't know why he didn't get it instead.
Well, he needs to listen to our podcast, get his head straight.
Yeah, exactly. So if we're to go doing the quick ones, we're building up to the bigger ones. I will start with the MicroMacro bonus box. So MicroMacro is a series of 4 games from Pegasus Spiel, among others, Edition Spielweise, designed by Johannes Siesch. Probably murdered some of that. And worth pointing out, the artists Daniel Gall, Tobias Yoshinki, and Johannisic himself.
I feel like MicroMacro is 100% art.
Yes, the game is almost certainly art. The whole thing is a massive poster. So every individual box has a massive poster with maybe 12, 15 cases to solve in Crime City, because on that massive poster are hundreds of tiny little characters, all going about various stages of their life over time. I say life, it's all within a very short time frame. But crimes are happening, and your job is to identify what went wrong. So if you find a murdered rabbit man in the middle of the street, often you'll see a knife, and then if you look around the area where he is, you'll find somebody carrying a knife and following the rabbit man menacingly, and then you can trace that back. You follow that direction, try and find out where they've gone. Maybe they get into a vehicle and you've got to find where that vehicle went and got back out, and then you'll pick the story back up of where the man with the knife went afterwards. And done that. So there's 4 boxes like that. I did the first 2, and then when I got the third one, that's when I discovered that this bonus box was going to come out, and the bonus box contains cases on all 4 maps. But at this point, I'd got rid of the first 2 because I'd done all the missions. And people were quick to berate me, saying, oh no, they've always said that this was happening. No, I rebought boxes 1 and 2. Nowhere does it mention, keep these until we've released the bonus box. So anyway, so finished all the cases normally, got the bonus box. Worth highlighting, the only thing I really want to highlight is that it's not worth it, the bonus box, right? Rebuying those 2 games, although I'll get, a portion of my money back from selling the one again, wasn't worth it. Only 3 of the cases in the bonus box are epic cases, which use all 4 maps. I thought the whole box was bonus, big missions, because even after having done the missions that are in the box, the bonus missions, the ones on the website, and these epic cases, there's still things going on in these maps that have not been covered as a crime. There's still loads of things on there. They just seem to have not published the tale that goes with them, the investigation that goes with them.
Maybe they're supposed to act as red herrings as well.
Yeah, possibly. I mean, it's just interesting what's going on. Worth note, I've also done the MicroMacro Jigsaw, which is a small section of the third box, and doesn't have... If you're thinking about getting the Jigsaw does not have cases. It has purely Where's Wally style, find this type questions on the back of the instructions. So anyway, yes, it wasn't worth it. The epic cases were not all that epic. We thought we might run out of space, because having 4 massive A1 size maps out at a time, but actually you can go through it, do 1 map, and then the game will tell you when you want to switch to it'll mostly tell you when you want to switch to a different map. There was one case where it seemed to miss that, and we had to figure out that we should be looking at something else. But it was, overall, MicroMacro was quite fun. I don't think I ever want to do another one. At least not for a long time. Your back gets super sore. Doing like 14 cases hunched over this bit of paper, looking around and walking around them is a lot for an old man like me. And if you've got poor eyesight as well, this is not a game for you. Or poor lighting even, this would not be a game for you.
Well, I've got one that's even quicker than that, Barry. I played Castles of Burgundy Special Edition with 3 players. We used all the content except for the shields. It was great. That's it.
Yep, agreed. I enjoy Castle Burgundy at all times. I think some of the shields are a bit bust, to be honest, when you're playing the Duchy rule. Whereas using the Vineyard's great. I think you can go Vineyard heavy. I don't think you can just do Vineyard, but I think you can go Vineyard heavy and still score quite well. What are the other ones? The extra tiles, like the White Castle,
the inns and the White Castle.
Yeah, they're fine. You can just throw them in.
Is Duchy the one where you're making the lines?
Yes.
Yeah, so we included that. We used the right maps for that. It actually has in the special edition the capacity, I think, for you to use the duchy rules with any map. But it does say if you're playing this expansion, specifically use these numbered maps. So we did that.
Yeah. No, it's great. One of my favorite games.
Yep, mine too. That's Castles of Burgundy Special Edition, and the designer is Stefan Feld, and the artists are Jakob Diskowski, Peter Foxakowicz, Patrick Jatraska, Hugh Labeck, Pamela Lewinska, and Porter Orleansky, published by Awaken Realms. I'm sorry for the artists. I really appreciate your work, and I cannot pronounce your names.
Darn the written word.
What I might actually do is just go back and like record Google saying them and just edit that in.
We'll do that for me and the MicroMacro guys as well.
If I do it at all, I'll cover us both.
All right, I'll go. And I don't think I can beat the speed on your Castles of Burgundy. We spoke a little last episode, maybe episode before. Arkham Lovecraft Letter. Arkham Files Lovecraft Letter.
Yep, I've now played this.
Me too. Published by Z-Man Games, originally designed by Seiji Kanai.
The originator of Lovecraft and of Love Letter and all the Love Letters.
Yeah.
Most of them. I don't know.
And Love Letter, if you don't know, a deduction hand management game where you're trying to guess what the other players are holding to eliminate them in various ways. Or reach the end of the round with the highest value card. And there are a variety of versions of this game that exist now. However, this version is a republication using the Arkham Files art, which is the common art pool that Fantasy Flight Games has for their Arkham Files series of games. And it changes the base formula by adding in insanity cards, where you have to test your sanity if you have any in play in front of you, which could eliminate you before you take your action on a turn. So it's another way of being knocked out, but they do have some relatively powerful insanity abilities, and you can win by playing Cthulhu and having a couple of insanity cards out. And last time I spoke about it, I said I wasn't keen on the art, reusing the art. The art was good. The art's to very high standard, but it was the same art I've seen for the past 25 years, coming out of the Arkham Files, and the same style of art in particular, and thought it didn't look very good. But having seen it, it is not as ugly as I thought. Actually, quite fine within the context of the game, to my mind. And the insanity mechanism, interesting enough, adds a little. The additional cards adds a little. It's a bit more complicated than the base game, but I think that's probably fine, because it's not a super complicated game to begin with. So what did you think of this version?
Yeah, so I really liked this version. I was playing it with a couple of people who were not super keen on it, so I will try not. Well, actually, to be fair, one of them really liked it, and the third did not like it. But to be fair, they're not hobby gamers. They're just people I know who I thought we could just play this with, because it is fairly simple and fairly accessible. But it seemed like that insanity mechanism was just one step too far. Not that I think the player who didn't like it would have necessarily liked Lovecraft Letter anyway, or Love Letter anyway. So the point is, I really like what the insanity does. I think it's a fun mechanism. I like the game. I like Love Letter anyway. So yeah, seems nice. I like the push your luck stuff. So it's not really push your luck, but you know what I mean.
Yeah,
I like the extra jeopardy. Heightened jeopardy.
Dun, dun, dun. All right, can you go even faster than before?
Yes, I can. It's Fellowship of the Ring, the trick-taking game. So we brought this to the convention. We played it. Mark and I have our ongoing game. We folded Michael, who contributes to the show, into that. Michael really likes card games. That's his like bridge and cooperative card games, or even like hold the power type card games are sort of his his natural comfort zone. So this fell right into that. We played it with 3 players, just continuing on from where Mark and I were. Michael picked it up super fast because he knows card games anyway. And we thought the 3-player game felt almost exactly the same as the 2-player game, which was a really positive sign. We had a really good time continuing it. I still think that the luck of the draw has quite a lot of influence of your success. So I'm conscious that if you're looking for something with a high skill ceiling or that sort of escalates skill quite consistently over the course of the campaign, you might find this a little lacking, but overall really enjoyed by everyone involved. And I think it's kind of hard to miss with this one. This is Fellowship of the Ring, the trick-taking game designed by Brian Bomueller. Artists are Ellen Ryan, Samuel Shimoda, and the publisher's Office Dog.
All right. Stepping up a little in terms of the chat and how long it will take to describe, I have finally played Chaos in the Old World at 5 players. So this is the old FFG game set in the world of Warhammer, designed by Eric Lang. And we spoke about it in the last podcast, where I kind of glossed over a little kind of what went on, but it's a dudes on the map game. Each player is a chaos power, and they have highly asymmetric powers, albeit the same basic actions. Every round you flip an event, classic FFG. Players then take their turn to shot about, playing cards, deploying troops, before moving into the battle phase, where if any opposing PCs are, they'll have a fight, and that's just chucking dice, and then moving on to see if they'll score any points whilst corrupting the world around them. So there was an expansion for this game that introduced the 5th player, the Horned Rat. So the original 4 Chaos powers, Khorne, Nurgle, Tzeentch, and Slaanesh. And then the Horned Rat, which is like the Skaven god, a sort of semi-demi Chaos power within the world of Warhammer. And in this version of the game, finally having played 5 players, we used the entire updated card deck rather than the base card deck, and I found the whole game worked really very smoothly. The Horned Rat fit in pretty well to the situation as a whole, because they don't contribute corruption. It's not like the game's massively accelerated towards that end state where all the old world is overrun. But they were still able to pick up points through their corruption mechanism by just having their PCs on the board. The powers in the updated version seem generically better. I'm sure there is definitely some balance, which I'll look back into again for these decks, where you could use some of the base game ones with some of the expansion cards, but you could get a whole new set of powers and chaos cards per faction in the expansion, and those are the 2 big things that it adds. So other than the fact that an early event, I was playing Khorne. In the game, Khorne is supposed to eat all the Nurgle PCs. Nurgle kind of controls where Tzeentch can score their points, and Tzeentch should mess around moving Slaanesh's PCs to prevent them getting points from nobles. It's all sort of player balanced in that way. But an early event meant that I, as Khorne, could only roll 1 combat dice, and that event lasted for 4 or 5 turns, which meant I was unable to take care of Nurgle in quite the way I would normally within that role. And so the game came down to a little bit of a race for points between me and Nurgle. However, Nurgle's scoring potential for the corruption was far greater than mine. I potentially could have won if I'd taken the Blood Letter upgrade, which would let me score points for killing things, before my big character Bloodthirster upgrade, and then it would have been more of a race towards the end. Or I might have pipped it the round before. The rest of the players are all close on the dial. They were all getting their ticks or double ticks, but fighting amongst themselves for it. But it came down to a Nurgle victory on points, and nobody else was able to catch him.
So you mentioned the interplay between the factions there, and I guess in the core game, the one you missed out, I guess, was Slaanesh is supposed to be doing something about Khorne.
Yeah, they can make his. I'm pretty sure they can capture my PCs kind of thing, tempt them over with their Slaneshi ways.
And for you children at home, don't worry about that.
Yep.
But where does the horned rat fit into this dynamic then?
So the horned rat has a little bit of everything. The rat ogres aren't too bad. They've got sort of 2 attack dice, only 1 defense, I think, or maybe they've only got 1 attack dice and 2 defense for their middle characters. We never got the big horned rat on the board. Just the rat ogres. It's hard to really explain the interplay because it's all negotiation as well. If you're unable to kind of you don't have to do the same thing every time. Like, it's not like I have to go after Nurgle, but it's much easier for me to keep Nurgle in check than the other players. And so if I'm not doing it, they're unlikely to be doing it, and therefore Nurgle gets that acceleration. So then you're kind of... And so where I wasn't able to do that, I had to find something else to do, which may have slowed down the other characters or the other players from what they were trying to do a little bit. And I don't know, like, it's hard to say exactly how it fits in. There's no play sheet for the horned rat the same way there is for the base game powers, where it tells you, tells Slanesh specifically not to get involved in a land war in Asia against Khorne, and because they're not winning that, right? But it says, look, here's what you should do. Where there's a no ball, move people in and out. Tzeentch you can somewhat control as a group by trying to not let them have their double magic icons or the warp stone if you can control it. And the Skaven player did fine. They were the same as everybody else, pretty much. Maybe 15 points behind the 50 in that last round. But again, 1 dial tick away from a potential victory in the next round. But I couldn't specifically say what their core thing was. They can spread out a bit like Nurgle. They can fight a bit like Khorne. They've got some sort of cost changing cards to make it more expensive to get in and out of places. They do a little bit of everything, although I'm sure they do have their own identity. But everybody had a pretty good time with it, and we'll definitely, probably but we will definitely play it again at some point. We'll probably play it again soon.
I'll try to get my copy to the table, and then we can compare notes.
Yeah. Because, I'm probably not selling the horned rat. Like, it's not needed, but it didn't feel out of place at all within the game, which was kind of my concern, that, the things might be thrown off in one way or another, and that wasn't the case. Because the horned rat character doesn't place corruption tokens, it's not accelerating the game in the same way towards a specific end, but they're still wanting to be in all these areas in order to pick up the points when things do eventually pop due to corruption. They dominate, so that was their thing. So dominating is having enough card value and bits of plastic to beat the area total, as well as any other player in there. And so he was in enough areas to start picking up points as well. So it's another character that threatens to win both in points and on the dial. Just it fit in good.
No, I'm excited to get Chaos in the Old World back to the table when I can. I'm sure I'll find a group here.
Yeah, like the couple of games we played, and everybody's just like, oh yeah, it's really good. It's like, yeah.
There's a reason why it's stayed in the conversation despite being a 15-year-old game.
And out of print for most of it.
Yeah. I played a tiny game at Airecon called Capital Lux. I've been trying to get this played for a while just because I'd heard it was good, and it's been weirdly difficult to find given that it is a deck of cards and 5 golden tokens. It is designed by Christian Edmundsen Ustby and Elif Svensson, the 2 designers behind Saltfjord, Santa Maria, Revive, and The Magnificent. The art is by Kwanchai Moria, and the publisher is Porta Games. So Capital Lux is it is, I guess it's a tableau building game. It's a competitive card game. It takes all of half an hour to play, probably less. It's 2 to 4 or 5 players. Michael and I played it 2-player, and then I played it again 3-player. Because it's so fast. And functionally what you're doing is you're building up the capital and your own hometown as well through capturing cards. So the deck is numbered cards in 4 different suits. I believe it's 2 to 8, but there are duplicates of numbers as well. And on your turn, so it's 3 rounds. Each round begins with a draft. You draft a hand of 5 or 6 cards, depending on player count, and then you just play rounds until somebody runs out of cards. You can have an uneven hand size, even though you draft the same number. So once somebody's out of cards, everyone else gets to play one more, and then the round ends, and any cards left in your hand are automatically added to your hometown, which could be something you planned for and very beneficial. It could also be bad. And the reason for that is because on your turn, you either play a card into your hometown, so it's played face up into your hometown or into the capital. And what you really want to do is you've got these 4 different suits, right? And you're kind of creating like a majority. So you want to have more in a suit than your opponent. And the suits are actually characters, and it's to give it some theme. So you've got these 4 characters that exist in the capital, and all of the suits mimic them. So there's like a scholar and a miner. God, it might be 5 suits actually. Doesn't really matter. The point is a number of suits, and the core conceit is that you're trying to build the majority. So you want to have the most in the scholar suit, and then you're going to get some bonus points at the end of the round, more than your opponent. However, if you have more value in your hometown than the capital has in the same suit, you have to discard all of your cards, which is quite significant, and it's quite bad. So you're trying to build up your numbers in your hometown while also build up the numbers in the capital, while also, and trying to stay ahead of your opponent, and you don't know what cards they have in hand. So that's the core dilemma, right? And so you either play the card face up into your tableau, and that's it. All you get is some numbers in that suit, or you place it into the capital, which you might want to do because then the capital has some more in that suit, and that means you can have more in that suit. But also, when you play it face up into the capital, each suit has a power that you trigger. So there are 4 different powers, and they're just little things, little wrinkles in the game. Like one lets you top deck a card. That's how you wind up with uneven hands. One of them lets you get a little token that can be worth a point at the end of the game, or adjust your values up and down by 1. So you might be able to save a suit in your tableau when it goes over the capital's number. And, so it's not that complicated. That's all there is to it. At the end of a round being 1 hand of cards, everybody scores the majorities. If anyone's gone over, they functionally bust. They have to discard all the cards in their tableau that match that suit. And whoever has the majority gets to take the largest card in that suit from the from the capital, and they put it face down in their play area, and that's points at the end of the game. And so at the end of the game, you're going to get those bonus points plus whatever's left face up in your tableau. And your tableau and the capital's tableau stays face up round to round. So there's 3 rounds. So after the scoring, you just start this drafting again, but you've still got face up cards that you played in the first or second round, and the capital still has whatever it's got. But of course, because everyone's scoring off the capital, keeping the capital's numbers up can be quite difficult. And it depends on your table dynamic as well. You might have a group of players who are like super into buffing the capital, so their tableaus are safe, and they don't actually mind maybe whether or not they win the majorities. They just don't want to discard their cards, because some people have that real sort of like loss aversion. But you might have a table which is just like saboteurs, and they just YOLO and give nothing to the capital so that everyone goes bankrupt, which is also fun. So it is a surprising amount of good time for such a little tiny box. I'd heard good things about it. I'd really wanted to play it. It's weirdly hard to find. There is a pocket edition and an expansion, but like you can't get any of the core game, either of the core games, Capital Lux or Capital Lux Pocket Edition, from the publisher. They didn't have it at Essen last year. They didn't have it at Essen this year. They've been promising a reprint forever. It's not back in stock. So I don't know when it'll come back. It's just a deck of cards, and it's a good game. So I'm really surprised that it's not available. But
is it not that Capital Lux 2?
Oh yeah, I mean it's the exact same game from my understanding.
Yeah, but it has different variable power, so it contains the first game, does it not?
I don't know, to be fair. So yeah, maybe it's got just more more variability for the suit's powers. Yeah. I don't know what the expansion offers, but yeah, it's just weird that it's hard to find. But I recommend keeping your eye out for it. If you ever see it secondhand, pick up a copy because it's probably cheap, and it's just a really nice little sort of card game, especially if you like these sort of like little trick-taking games. It's not trick-taking. It's sort of drafting and then guessing. But it has that vibe, of like a sort of a mean trick-taking game. What's in their hand kind of thing. Although it's much less calculatable, like I said, because there's duplicates of all the numbers. But yeah, that's Capital Lux. Enjoyed it.
Nice. I'm going to throw in another cheeky quick one. I mentioned I played this game a couple of podcasts ago, and it was Nova Era. So this is published by Simon Games and designed by Andrea Gervasio, artist Agnes Repoche. But again, still think you're going to see more and more of her with her art style on board games going forward. And this is a civilization builder played out over effectively 9 rounds of 3 eras. So three rounds per era. And in it, there's 4, technically 6 suits of cards. You've got your, I forget what they are, like research, your military, your economy, and your education. And then you've got your leaders and your territories. So you've got all these different card types that are all roughly the same. You are drafting dice, which you use to either gain resources, to buy cards, or pay for cards, or to worry about trying to bring down the unrest within your civilization. And I played it, I think, did I play 3-player before? I think I played 3-player before, and I think I said it was a bit long. I'd give it another go and see how I felt at the end of it. This was another 3-player game, went a lot faster this time. 1 new player. And seen a little more of the disasters in this game, because if you don't draft the right dice, the disasters, well, I say draft the right dice, but if you, depending on what dice you leave from the draft, that's going to build up disasters, whether that's a riot, whether that's a economic collapse, or potentially even a dark age. And this time we did see a dark age, which is bad. You lose dice, you lose values of your dice, and lots of cards were destroyed from our tableaus in this game, which didn't happen in the first game. And it kept things a bit more manageable, so things were probably a bit faster that way. People were less afraid of drafting and leaving the bad dice to kick off. We had some more interesting powers this game. And yeah, it was pretty good. I still think it's not a top tier, everybody has to play it type game, but if this is a Civ builder that you might like, or if you like Civ builders, you might like this one in particular. The only downside is this disaster aversion type system, like I mentioned before with Empire's End. This is the same kind of thing. People will upgrade technologies which may impact your civilization. When people discover cavalry, suddenly your infantry are outclassed and you've got to put them into the past type deal. And if you do that, that's fine, you score a point for it, but if another player does it, you just lose it. And what you're also trying to do at the end of every age is to have the majority, well, to have all your bases covered, but also have the majority in any singular type. So military, economy, knowledge, culture, to get points. And in this game, all three of us had something missing. Again, the first game, all of us had everything, and we were just competing for majorities. In this one, some people had nothing in some areas of the game, all the way up to age 3, and it was just a bit more. It was a bit more interesting this time around. Now, all that said, the game did end in a draw. 2 of us finished on the same points with the same tiebreaker, and then there was no additional tiebreaker, so it was just a straight tie. And the rule book needs... The rules are fine, the cards are unclear, and there's no clarification in the game for exactly how a card works. Like, a card might say, discard this to do something. Okay, when? Do I have to spend a dice for this, or do I not have to spend a dice for this? It's just all very... There's a lot of interactions like that where it's just the timing's unclear and what you're supposed to be doing is unclear.
Yeah.
And the game needs an FAQ quite badly. You can push through it, but as a game player, I don't want to be making those kind of decisions for things that must have come up. So they've come up in both games now. I refuse to believe they didn't come up at any point during testing.
Correct. Yeah, there's literally no chance that you're playing it twice has uncovered something they didn't find in playtesting. So they've just forgotten to address it.
Yeah, they would have known how it plays, and they've not put it in the...
Yeah. Well, probably what happened is someone who playtested it or designed it, who'd played it a lot, wrote the rulebook and just forgot. They internalized it, and they're like, oh no, people will understand how this works.
And in fact, there's, again, on any Board Game Geek page in the forums, what you don't want is your rules forum to be twice as much as any other forum on your number of threads in any forum. Yeah.
You want the strategy forum. Strategy forum to be big. Is that one? Is there one?
There is a single post in the strategy forum for Nova Era.
Oh.
And it's not even a good.
Very good. Well, speaking of history and civilization, I've been playing a game set in the only historical period that matters to the British, which is World War II. I've been playing War Story, well, actually, specifically the English, I think. I've been playing War Story Occupied France. This is a narrative-driven, choose-your-own-adventure-esque World War II game. It's from 2024. It's published by Osprey Games. The artist is Quanchi Moria, who I just mentioned, who did Capital Lux, which is wild. The designers are Dave Neal, who you'll know from Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective and Perspectives. The other designer is, of course, David Thompson, who everyone will know from Undaunted series. He also did Resist, Sniper Elite, the board game, the For What Remains series, which is a skirmish game I really like, and the Valiant Defense series, which is a solo war game series I haven't looked at because I don't really play solo games, but maybe Barry has. I don't know. Yeah. Valiant Defense series?
No, unless that's not the.
It's Pavlov's House, Castle.
Yeah, I was going to say Pavlov's House. Yeah. I've not played it. I've seen them.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, they're sort of heroic moments of defense during World War II. So there's 4 of them, I think: Castle Itter, Pavlov's House, and 2 more that I've forgotten the name of. Anyway. Oh, postmen in soldiers and postmen's uniforms is one of them, and then a 4th one that I've forgotten the name of. Anyway, point of the story is War Story Occupied France is a game about you're playing an English spy network who go undercover in France, and you're linking up with the French resistance in order to hurt the German logistics during the war. And it is a campaign. It's just 3 episodes. Each episode is 1 to 2 hours. So it's not a very big campaign. It is mostly linked paragraphs of text with decision making. And so, the it's very choose your own adventure. You do have 8 spies. They can die. You want to try not to let all 8 die before you get to the end of the whole thing. That's the core thing. Each spy has stats, and so on each mission, you're given some amount of introduction, and then you choose which 4 you're going to bring and try to bring ones with stats that you think are going to be good for the mission. And then a lot of the decision making will be like, choose this or that. If you choose that, then you're going to have to count up your stat in this, and based on what you've got, will determine the outcome. Maybe you can spend some tokens to improve it. So very minor sort of rules overhead for that decision-making process. There's also quite a fun mechanism where the game actually comes with quite a lot of maps, and a reasonable amount of maps. And they're secreted in envelopes, which is exciting. But it comes with cubes, and you'll put the cubes out on the map, and they'll sort of represent your spies and enemy soldiers, and you'll move them around the map. And it feels very sort of like, war logistics-y, so it's quite nice and involving. And then you'll move the cubes around and have to make decisions about where they go and things like that. It's not super involved. The maps tend to be, very much like, deploy the cubes, and then at various points, the cube will move to one other spot, and then that's done. But, it's just enough to give it a nice sort of flavor and sense of sort of like World War II-esque logistical planning on a map, I have yet to determine how consequential the actual stats and decision making is. It doesn't, it's got sort of Sherlock Holmes consulting detective vibes in the sense that I'm not necessarily sure how much I'm supposed to be able to discern from the text I'm reading and how much good decision making I can do. So far, we've been fairly successful in the missions, which I think has been good, at least fairly successful for a first run through. I imagine on subsequent run throughs, you will be better equipped, but you'll have to have memorized a lot of what happened to optimize decisions and get through these things more smoothly. Going into the third mission, it does check your total sort of, I guess for want of a better term, like German alertness, so you develop this over the course of the first 2 missions, and as it escalates, things get tougher. And there was an implication when it asked us how much German alertness did we have, that we could have significantly less. So I guess the implication is that you could be doing significantly better, but I don't know if that's akin to doing a Sherlock in consulting detective, which is to say basically impossible.
Yeah.
We have been largely taking the same 4 spies. Well, we did actually on the first 2 missions take the same 4 spies. And that's because the other spies had abilities. When we picked the spies for the first mission, we didn't know what the abilities did. At the end of the second mission, I read those abilities again, and finally I knew how to play the game after 2 missions, and I was like, oh, we definitely should have brought some of these. Like, all the text abilities are really good. We've just been kind of going through with the white bread spies that just have stats. But if you like narrative-driven things, if you like World War II as a setting, I think you'll enjoy this. We've been playing it 2-player. I think it would be good at 2 or 3. I think even at 3, the decision making is not going to feel like, it's not like the player count affects anything really. It's just discussion, and you can decide how you want to divvy up decision making and who reads from the book and stuff like that. I really think it is a sit down at the table and read aloud the passages to the table. So it is very much sort of like communal storytelling time. I really enjoyed it. I've been enjoying it. The writing is good enough to keep us hooked. So, I think it's, solid. If you like the setting, if you like that kind of game, definitely check it out. It's from Osprey Games. And also, this was a review copy that we were given at Essen. I should mention that. But I wanted to mention as well, it does do one thing which I really hate, which is that when you have linked paragraphs of text, it doesn't put them in sequentially, so you can't like sort of read ahead or behind, which I think helps with drama, right? I don't mind that it does that, but it doesn't link the number you came from. So you got to put your thumb on the page. If you need to thumb back to the previous paragraph and remembered what you did, or how you got here, you got to keep your thumb on that page because it doesn't put the linking paragraph that got you here. So just a note for the future, if you're doing a narrative-driven game with linked paragraphs, make sure you put somewhere in the title of the paragraph like the number that brought you here so people can go back if they want to.
Good advice. Yeah, I did look at this before it was out. I couldn't quite work out if it was an escape room style game or a Sherlock style game, but sounds more.
Yeah, I mean, having played Sherlock,
adventure like
I mean, I'd say it's more consulting detective than, Unlock or something like that.
Yeah.
But it's not super Sherlocky, and it's not really like sort of deduction or mystery solving, right? Because you're sort of driving forward in events. You're sort of given missions that you're going out on. So you're not like trying to solve a murder, but instead it's going to be like you have to break into the compound. Do you want to go talk to the locals? Do you want to scout the compound from the hill? That kind of stuff. But again, just like Sherlock, actually, you've got time that's ticking on, so you can't do everything, and you've got to try to prioritize and make good decisions. And sometimes you have some information to act on, and sometimes you've just got to use your best instincts and hope, But I do get the sense that there's quite a lot of like replayability and different routes you can take as well.
All right, nice. So a game that we mentioned last week for the new editions that were coming out, that's editions with a Z. And that is Agricola. This is currently published by Lookout Games, designed by Uwe Rosenberg. So did Le Havre and A Feast for Odin. And again, the current artist Clement Franz, who's done Le Havre, Orléans, Clans of Caledonia. And I mentioned I wasn't a big fan of Agricola and wasn't particularly thinking about backing the new Awaken Realms campaign when it does surface, whether that be the zombie version or not. So Agricola is an incredibly tight worker placement where you never have quite enough resources to do what you want, and feeding your family. This is where the jokes mostly originate from about how many Euro games after this came where there was a drain on resources in the form of feeding your workers at the end of the round. Agricola has a card drafting at the start of the game. Well, you don't have to card draft, but card drafting or card powers that you get at the start of the game, and jobs for upgrades, which is where a lot of the variety comes from, because the game has a reasonable amount of variety in the core box, but also a dozen different decks, which completely replace all those powers and upgrades, which you can choose from and mix and match and kind of do whatever you want with it. So I mentioned I didn't like Agricola so much, and that's because in my early gaming career, it was a toughish game to follow as a noob. And so I played it once in real life and thought, okay, I don't know how I feel about that. Wasn't blown away by it. And then I started playing on the app. I'll send you a screenshot of the app, Mike, but the app is visually trash. Having gone back to the main game now, but I think that's where a lot of my dislike for the game has come from. The playing it on the app and not really knowing what was going on.
Yeah, send me some screenshots. I'll put them on the video portion of this podcast.
So if you've never seen it though, you've got your core part of the app has your base actions, and then there's another half of the app that you have to like scroll over to, where things unlock in what feels like a random order. But now I understand that it is the way that the action spaces become available in the main game, one per turn. There's a new action space. But I never really figured out why something would unlock in a particular order in one game and in a different order in another game. And so when I scrolled across to take an action and it wasn't there, I was like, I don't know what's going on.
Isn't it just player count? that changes that?
No. So you've got so in Agricola you have 4 level 1 actions which are shuffled up and dealt in a random order. So you're going to get
yeah.
The first 4 are going to be those actions, but you don't know what order they're coming out in.
Yeah.
And that's very obvious in the game because you've shuffled up and dealt them out. It is not obvious in the app.
Yeah.
So last week played the original version, so I think pre-revised version even, for real. And although I lost by some margin, I did actually have a path to win with the draft. Had I taken the braggart, I would have got 9 additional points for playing him, and that would have been enough to win. But it was a fun enough game. It was tight enough. It was interesting enough that I thought, actually, you know what? This game isn't so bad. Maybe I will pick it up. Maybe I will pick up the new one. So I went back that evening to the app, played the app. The app is trash, and I hated it. So then just again last week, so we're like, wow, it's fresh in our minds. Why don't we play on Board Game Arena? Because it has a much nicer layout and stuff for it. So the 3 of us that played the real life version went onto Board Game Arena, and it's a nice enough rendition on Board Game Arena. It all makes sense visually. I understand what's going on. It changes the verticality to horizontally, but that doesn't make any real difference to the game. But again, lost that by some margin, and I didn't enjoy it enough that I think I'm going to back the new versions. I can get better at the game, right? So I perhaps overvalue the ability for playing out careers and cards before getting going, right? Because every career that you play, or every job that you play, and every upgrade you play will give you benefits that when you eventually go and take a particular action. And I feel like I overvalued playing those before going and taking those actions, whereas actually you probably only want to play, well, you want to play them all, but you're probably only going to get to play and have meaningfully impact the game a lot fewer cards than I was putting out. And some cards you'll get incidentally, but from taking other actions, but probably shouldn't be a focus unless you're focusing on a particular upgrade strategy or a career strategy. And it always just felt, right, okay, I've got this in place now, I'm ready to take this action, and then one of the other players would go there, and there's no backup, or there's almost no backup to the spots that are out until very late in the game, at which point everybody's wanting them. And so if you're not taking the first player they're in before, and getting those spots early, and even then, once you've taken those spots, somebody's going to go to their second place choice, which is probably your second place choice, and then you don't get it on the next one, and it's just, it's too grim. It's too grim a game. I think modern gaming is more forgiving, and allow you to approach things in probably a few more ways than Agricola does. It was too punishing for trying to come up with a strategy. And yes, I can get better at the game, and I probably will play it again, but I'm not going to jump into backing it when the new version is.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
I don't know when the last time you played Agricola was, but
I played it not too long ago, less than a year ago. I played it at 2 players because I was showing it to Mark. Mark hadn't played it before. And we played the physical copy. There might have been some of the expansion decks mixed in there, I'm not sure. But, it was all fairly cookie cutter. And I enjoyed it. I enjoy Agricola. I think there's some pretty rough, like low-level heuristics. And what I mean by that is your first game, if you've never played it before and you don't know anything about it, your first game will probably be pretty rough, especially if people have played it at least once before, because there's just stuff you pick up on, like not feeding your people is really quite damaging. How to balance the value of not feeding them against the value of food and animals, which you can eat. The value of the fireplace that converts animals into food tokens is huge. And the fireplaces, of course, are a first come, first serve sort of escalating system. So if somebody just grabs that early doors because they understand its value, then now you've not only missed understanding its value at all, but now you've got to buy the more expensive one, which is functionally the exact same, just more expensive. And, you know, understanding the value of sort of like preparing for Wish for a Child and understanding when you might be able to get that and whether you're going to be able to compete to get it. Because, of course, going into the turn where Wish for a Child appears, you may not be in a position to get the child because either you're not right in turn order, or you just don't have the resources for the child, or you don't have the room in the house, you know. So there's a lot of sort of like punishing things that you just kind of have to grok. But I think, and so I think that it's like, you know, for a game that's relatively light on just in terms of sort of rules overhead, it's pretty savage, and that's why it's got the reputation it has. And just in terms of sort of pitfalls you can fall in and just kind of mess your game up. Like, even, you know, I've played it 3 or 4 times. I'm still pretty bad at it, you know, and I'm normally quite good at these sorts of games. But I think that's why it's got this sort of staying power as well. You know, it feels like there's a sort of a skill curve, and it rewards repeated plays, and that's satisfying. So I can see why people keep going back to it, you know, and to an extent,
my biggest gripe for the last game I played was, right, I was set up, I had my wheat, I had my clay oven, I just needed to take the bake bread action, but there's only one spot to bake bread, which is tied into sowing your fields for whatever reason. And because somebody wanted to sow their fields, they had no desire to bake bread, they took that spot as their first action. And then I had to spend the rest of the round in all 3 of my actions to get enough food just to feed people, whereas previously I was going to do it in a oneer and get, you know, further my game a little, but there was no backup. Like, I would have gladly sacrificed being able to sow the fields just to bake my bread. Or not gladly, but, you know, that would have been an acceptable second option, which just doesn't exist. So,
but I believe you can make your own kiln and then you can bake your own bread, right?
Well, you need to take the bake bread action specifically.
So even if so that just improves the efficiency of that action, the kiln?
So until you've got a clay oven or an iron oven, baking bread doesn't do anything for you, really.
Right, you can't, right. So you need the cards to just enable the value there.
Yeah, but then you have to take specifically the bake bread action, which the only place that exists on the board is the sow action, which does something else entirely. So anyway.
Should have just been first in turn order, Barry.
I should have. I mean, I was many turns, just not that turn.
But that's the turn you needed to be. Sounds like strategic error. It's rough, and this is exactly what I'm talking about. But you know, I do think it's sort of savage in a way that actually is quite uncommon, and that's one of the things that makes it, because like even Caverna, which is so similar in so many ways, feels less savage than Agricola for some reason.
I've not played it. I played Caverna, but I've not played it enough to really draw the comparisons in terms of the cutthroatness.
I mean, there's so many similarities, but I think where, like, just in terms of the spot, I think the worker placement spots, and I can't tell you why, but the worker placement spots in Caverna feel a bit more generous. Like, there's more of them that kind of do similar things or allow you to do things. Where Caverna gets cutthroat really is because it doesn't have the private cards, you know, that everyone's got. So everyone's got like a hand of private cards in Agricola. So you've got a sense of building towards something, you know, that you're always going to be able to get. Whereas Caverna gives you this massive tableau of stuff you can build from, but it's communal and it's first come, first served. And there is scope in Caverna to grok what someone else is doing or how much a tile is worth to someone and just nab it from them, which can and has been done in Caverna and is very mean.
Google's AI overview is telling me that I can bake bread at the start of my feeding phase. I'm like, what?
I know there's more ways to bake bread, but I can't remember what enables them.
If I had the baker profession, I could have done it, but I thought it was just like...
And that's a card you have to get at the start, right? The draft.
Yeah, you have to draft it and play it.
All right, well, Barry, I've exhausted all of my light games, so do you have any more you would like to cover?
No.
So I'll jump in with the sort of the main of the two big games that we played at the convention that I want to talk about. It's not a big game. It's Rock Hard 1977, which is a game about musicians. This is in the sort of progressive rock genre, I guess. What this actually is a very straight down the line, middleweight. It's not worker placement. It's action selection, shall we say. It is worker placement, but you have one worker. Anyway, it's 2024. It came out last year, I guess. I think I was mostly hearing about this around November, December time. It's a 2 to 5 player game. We played it at 3, and I think that's the right count. Although it has a faux player who really just serves to block spots that it demands you implement it to, and says it's also optional to make the game more competitive at 3. I'll talk more about that in a minute, but then it's excluded at the 4 and 5 count. Also, the board is flipped at the 4 and 5 count. I actually don't know if the faux player would mean you would count as 4 and flip the board. I hope you would. More on that later. It says 45 to 90 minutes. That's pretty accurate. It really depends on player count, I think. Complexity is 2.47 out of 5. So it's exactly the same as Wingspan at 2.47 out of 5. And it's designed by Jackie Fox, who is notable because, well, for designing this game, but also because she is a musician who is in a band called The Runaways, or at least she was in the lineup of The Runaways at some stage in the 70s, and they're best known for their single Cherry Bomb, which I'm sure everyone's heard. The artist of the game is Jennifer Gilner, who has done one other board game called Nico Syndicate, which also came out last year. Publisher is Devere, who we know well. And, you know, this is you're playing a sort of a rock and roll musician coming up in the 1970s, and every player gets a random musician, or maybe 2 at the start of the game. You pick one, I can't remember, or maybe you just get one. They'll have a little asymmetrical power, and then you're taking turns in the game. It's a number of rounds. I think it's like 9 rounds or something. It's tracked with a calendar, made to look like time is passing, because thematically what you're trying to do is go from, you know, day job person to professional musician. And a round is structured by time as well. So there's a morning, a day, and a night phase, which are the 3 phases of the game. And you can take one action in each phase, and you're going to take those in turn order. And that's where it feels a little bit like a worker placement, because all the spots are first come, first served, and there's quite a lot of quite competitive spots. So you'll want to get in there first. And, you know, at the end of the day phase, everyone gets their one worker back, which is your musician, and it's an acrylic standee. They look really nice. And then you put them back out into the midday actions and so on. And there's a lot of really nice sort of little thematic quirks, right? Like at the end of the game, you're just toting up your victory points that you've scored. You'll score a lot of them during the game. I'd suggest you're going to score maybe 60 to 70% of your score during the game, the rest at end game. So most of it's scored during the game. And whoever has the most points is the best, so the most successful musician. There's also a lot of points for money. So if you want to go down the track of just like making a lot of money, you can. It comes with paper money. Not only that, all of the paper money is unique bills. So they all look different. And they've got like sort of scrawls on them and phone numbers and all kinds of sort of thematic things. Like you can really tell that this was thematically the theme, or the game is designed by someone who lived the theme, right? Like you can tell there's just all these nice little touches and things that this person's thought of and put into the game, which is great. The player board itself has 3 tracks on it, and they're just tracking your skills. So you've got I can't remember what they're called now. They're all thematic. It's nice. Like your chops. Your chops is just how good you are at being a musician. Your reputation, which is sort of how well you're known and known for your rock and roll lifestyle. And your last one is, I think it's just songs. It's how many songs you've written and how good they are, I guess. But instead of being tracks that you're like tapping a cube up, they're all knobs on an amplifier, and you tick them up every time you go up a step. That's nice. It's thematic. They don't feel like tracks. They feel like knobs, even though they're just tracks. You also in the game have so you start off with like a day job, and you kind of have to do that because you need money to take actions and pay for things, and so you have to take an action at some point in the day to go and do your job, and usually it will be a morning or day action that you have to go and do your job, but occasionally you'll have a night job and you do it in the third phase, the night phase. So instead of taking an action there, you'll just put your figure on your player board and do your job, and then you'll get a small amount of money. And if you don't take the job action, then you take a didn't show up for work token. If you get 3 of those, you lose the job and you can't take that action anymore. That's fun. What you want to do really is focus on the music and improving your chops and your songs so that you can start earning royalties from your music so that you can sack off the job and it doesn't matter anymore. It doesn't matter that you've lost access to that action because you're getting money from your music now. There is all these sort of little steps that you sort of have to fulfill in order, and you've also got a manager and you have to pay your manager at certain steps. So you need money for that. So you need money to take actions. Not all of them, but some of them, the important ones. You need money to pay your manager at certain round numbers. The manager gives you a special power that you can use, which is pretty good. If you can't pay the manager, you just lose victory points, which sucks. But also just like not having money is also quite limiting because you just have to go get money. Like actually it's more the gatekeeping of the actions is the more important side of that. So then you're going to get you can unlock like sort of records a single, and you can unlock signs a record deal. And you can, as you improve your chops and your songs and your reputation, go back and renegotiate your deal. And the level of your record deal gives you income. And so that's at the end of every round, some money and potentially some victory points that you're going to get. So that's really good to renegotiate and sort of set that up. Other things you have to do are acquire roadie tokens that let you do bigger gigs. You also have to just take actions to improve your songs and your chops. You go to the rehearsal studio, you get some chops. You go do radio interviews, you get some reputation. In the night phase, there's like 5 decks of cards, and they all give you various bonuses, but you don't quite know what's going to happen. So you can go out to the club, and maybe you'll get some reputation, or you can go and like schmooze the studio bigwigs at the after hours dinner party, and maybe you'll get some money, or you'll get some benefit. You might also get some candy. Candy are little tokens that you keep in your play area, and at the beginning of your turn, before you take an action, you can spend candy, and you draw a card from the candy deck, and maybe it also lets you take a bonus action.
Sounds like a special kind of candy.
Well, Barry, here's the thing. After you've taken the candy and the bonus action, you have to roll a die. And, when you draw the card, it will tell you it's either, it's either sugar-free candy, and then you don't get the bonus action, but nothing else happens. It's soft candy, in which case you get the bonus action, but your sugar craving goes up by 1. Or it's hard candy, and you get 2 bonus actions, but your sugar craving, I think it goes up by 2. And if it's soft or hard candy, you also have to roll a die. And if it's below your craving, which is another knob on your amplifier player board, then it goes, if it's below your craving, you're okay. But if it's over your craving, you're okay. If it's below your craving, then you have a sugar crash and you have to go to sugar rehab. So you can get these candy tokens to spend for bonus actions as well. And coming out of sugar rehab, you get to reduce your craving by 1. So you can really indulge and try and take lots of bonus actions and sort of push your luck that way, or you can just not. And then I guess the other notable thing about it really is the night phase is also the turn order, because the turn order is actually really important. And where you go in the night phase will determine the turn order for next round, including go to bed early, which is an action you take that does nothing, but it guarantees you first place next round. So, or first in turn order next round. So the thing is, like, the production's gorgeous. It's really, really nice. The art's great. The theme is very, very present in almost everything, except for like some of the game's most mechanical parts, right? Like functionally, so I quite enjoyed this. It was okay. But we were coming off the back of, well, it just, the thing is the sort of the structure, it almost felt like because it was so sort of thematic in some ways, it kind of felt like its sort of Euro game mechanisms were also really exposed, right? And so like when I sat down to play it, I could see all of the sort of the mechanisms and the order in which we had to achieve them and the optimal path through them. And it didn't feel like there was diverse strategies to pursue. It didn't feel like there was lots of sort of different avenues to explore. It just felt like, right. Like, and I think it's partly because, you know, like in the day or the second phase of the game, that's when you're going to be doing all your gigs and concerts. And there's just this escalating set of venues that you'll play, and each one is just better than the last. You know, and in order to unlock the next venue, you need to have your power at a certain, your reputation at a certain level, or your songs at a certain level, your chops at a certain level. You need to have bought a number of roadies, and then you can do that gig, right? And then you can do the next one if you get more of that stuff. So really, like the game itself is just simply a bunch of very basic logistic puzzles to tick up some tracks and acquire some tokens, and it's just about getting in those first, you know? And the record deal, I think, is hugely important because that's how you get income if you lose your job. And you don't want to be taking the job action because it's really bad and inefficient. So, you know, if you can be getting those royalties, that's just an income, a passive income. So like, it kind of just makes sense to prioritize that. So it felt like the sort of the Euro side of the game was all very transparent and very simple and very one-dimensional. Of course, in the 3-player game, you play on the 3-player side of the board. There is only one negotiate a record deal contract space, right? So like, and people have reasons to go back there to renegotiate their deal. So you want to try to get in there as early as possible. So there is some tension around timing and player timing and things like that. But it doesn't feel like you have like a massive amount of control over it, you know. There is some amount of control, but there's not. It's not enough, or it's not sort of diverse enough, and it's there's so much fun theme there, and it's so sort of present, the theme, and the art is really nice. And the production is really nice. And I feel, you know, the other thing is there's some luck in the game. It primarily comes from when you go to rehab by rolling that craving die, because that causes you to miss an action on the most, probably I don't know, actually, the morning and the day are both pretty important. But when you hit that craving, the other thing is there's some luck around the card you draw. You know, you could get a bum bonus action or double bonus action. There is also in the night phase those 5 decks of cards, which can be pretty consequential. You also get 5 points for collecting a set of them, which is really peculiar. I don't really understand why there's sort of a set collecting aspect to those. It really feels unnecessary. Candy, I really liked the idea, the novelty of the candy mechanism. Like, obviously it's supposed to be cocaine, right? And that's
what?
What? But I mean, I'm glad that that's being included, and it's fun, and it's funny for the adults that it's been made family friendly. But it feels like it falls a little on the wrong side of, or the luck elements of the game, I guess, fall a little on. It's got that thing where it's like, its bare bones are so Euro and so sort of like just logistics and efficiency puzzle, very basic logistics and efficiency puzzle, you know, and then it's got like just a smattering of luck that feels not prevalent enough or like too consequential, right? So like the swing involved in the small amount of luck in the game feels too consequential. So the game either needed more luck or less of it, you know?
Mm-hmm.
There's also no real mitigation for it. Some of the rockers have abilities that allow them to mitigate the luck, and some of them also have abilities that allow them, or some of the managers have abilities that mitigate the luck. But if you don't get either of those characters, then it doesn't help you, right? Like you can't mitigate the luck at all. There's also an event deck that puts out an event every turn, and a random gig deck that puts out a random gig every turn. And those can also be really consequential, but they are totally random and you have no way of seeing them. And this is what I mean. Like, it's not so heavy a game that you really, I feel like you should care about, say, seeing upcoming events and things so that you can strategize around them. That feels too much for a game this weight, a game that's hitting this audience. But at the same time, the Euro puzzle of the game, which is so prevalent, does feel so sort of like basic and mathsy that those random elements do feel like they can just sort of undermine the puzzle that you're trying to solve with their sort of random influence. And I found that frustrating. It felt to me a lot like the Witch Trials in Septima, if you've ever played that. But we disagree on Septima a bit, I think.
I had a good time with Septima.
Yeah, I found the Witch Trials to be too consequential and random.
I mean, I can't specifically remember. I can picture it. I can't remember what impact it had in the game.
Well, it can have it's the bag draw, right? Like you're going into the bag and pulling out your supporters. Anyway, it's for me it's about the relationship between the intensity and sort of mathsiness of the Euro puzzle and where the luck fits in. Because I have no problem with luck in games. I also have no problem with games that are pure luck, and games that are just like I enjoy Quacks. Like I have no problem with that. But I think if you're going to put a Euro framework down and then put luck on top of it, it's a fine balance to get right. And so I think hard rock kind of fits in this sort of peculiar spot where, like, I think it wants to target a sort of like a more accessible audience, a more accessible crowd. It's certainly very middleweight. And I think, maybe a lot of people that don't really care about this stuff could sit down and have a good time with it. But I just feel like the Euro elements of it will be a little off-putting for people. Like, it does feel a lot like you want to have these big turns or these cool turns where you're doing like rock and roll stuff. And then it's like, this turn I give a radio interview, and I tick up my reputation by 2. And that costs me $3. And that doesn't feel very rock and roll.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of get it. Like, I kind of know what you're saying. I've played games where the mechanical elements, like it's too exposed as to what's going on, particularly in a game like this, perhaps where there's theme oozing in some areas to be taken out of through the gameplay elements itself. You mentioned like the gigs get progressively better as you go along. Was there any case of like a runaway leader element of it if somebody was getting to those gigs first?
There definitely could be. Yeah, absolutely. That could be a problem. I think that could. There's not really any meaningful sort of catch-up mechanism.
Mm-hmm.
So I think.
Well, I mean, it seems like it's got a pretty strong base of a game. And I was just on the forums there, and Jackie's saying that she's not finished with the game yet, because people were asking for 80s expansions or standalones, and she's like, well, actually, we're not finished with 77 quite yet. I was like, all right, okay, fine. So there might be something coming that perhaps mitigates some of your less favourable elements.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, looking at the game, it is just a series of thresholds that you have to overcome, right?
Yeah.
It's just, here's the barrier for entry to get some income, then here's the barrier of entry for the gigs, and you just have to find the best way to get those points by managing turn order and your finances. And that's about it, really. And the thing is, like, I only also used the bonus action. So I won the game by a fairly considerable margin, and I only used the bonus actions twice. And I would have won by a lot more, except the second time I used it, I got caught out by the bad luck on the die, which didn't bother me because I was already pretty confident in the game. But what bothered me more was that it was just how sort of transparent all the thresholds were, and how sort of towards the middle of the game, it became quite apparent that the others weren't going to hit like the big arena gigs and stuff like that, unless they could figure out some way to massively escalate their values on the tracks, which just doesn't. I would have liked to see a little bit more kind of like push your luck elements, like I think the time track is really interesting, and I think the sort of going out, like there is a deck of cards in the night phase that just says breaks the rules in various ways, and we drew a couple of those, and they weren't especially interesting, but it would have been cool to see a way to sort of I don't know why there's a set collection element to those. It just feels like sort of a way to get extra points if you're never in first, because if you're never in first, you're not probably getting very good actions otherwise. So, we need to shore up the points of the people who aren't going to be first player by giving them bonus points for just getting a bunch of these cards. And there's even like a wild card that help you complete your set, but it doesn't have a bonus on it. So that whole set collection element just feels really like unnecessary. And I would have taken that out, and I would have let people like do some kind of like push your luck game with these cards, like get more than one at a time, get all these weird different little bonuses and things, and maybe catch up. But like if you get too many, or you amass like too many of the cards, maybe you have to go to the rehab space, or you like sleep in and miss the day phase or something. I don't know. Like it felt like there were these sort of luck elements there, but they didn't give any player agency over them, right? You were just kind of like rolling with the punches you got from the random elements of the game, instead of I have no problem going bust when I'm pushing my luck because I made those choices. And I think that that's really a really important part of it that's not present in the game. But, if people were really keen to play it, I think the novelty gives it some legs. The novelty, the theme, and the character of the art, and the way the theme is very present in the art, and the way it's tied into the action spaces. That is to say, all the action spaces feel like a thing you would have done to try and be a musician at the time. I mean, it starts to fall apart where it's like, you went to, you went to the rehearsal studio, tick up your chops track by 2, that's where it starts to fall apart. But in the meantime, you're looking at the board and you're like, I can go and renegotiate a record deal. I can go to the recording studio. I can go to the pub and play, like a pub gig, and stuff like that. Or you can also give blood for money. I think that's the action that you take when you really screwed up the economy in the game, like you lost your job without getting a record deal. But you can do that too. So like if that all feels really thematic, it's also wild that the blood people don't check for like cocaine levels in the blood, but never mind, eh? But yeah, so like anyway, I'll have a look at an expansion if they come out with it. I definitely would have sort of gone down the sort of the more sort of like push your luck or some control over the luck elements of the game, and put in a bit more mitigation for that too.
Nice one. Last game for me, and the game I think you've also been playing, or at least played a round of.
We might as well have both played, I think, different games, because these are going to be wildly different, I think.
Correct, right? So this is a game I think I maybe mentioned I was planning on playing last podcast, or maybe hadn't quite got around to at this point, but it was Dune Imperium Uprising, but with the Bloodlines expansion. But this time we took it even a step further and played the 6-player version of the game, which is a team-based Emperor versus Muad'Dib head-to-head team battle. So this is published by Dire Wolf and designed by Paul Dennen. Number of artists all on Direwolf Games staff by the looks of things, but Clay Brooks, Derek Herring, Raul Ramos, and Nate Storm all worked on various aspects of the game. So Dune Imperium Uprising is the sequel, standalone expansion, a standalone game. I don't know, what would you call it? You can't really integrate them. So the standalone version, upgraded version of Dune Imperium. Bloodlines is the latest expansion, which incorporates elements from the previous two expansions, which really only work with Uprising, but were designed to work with the base game, the original base game. It's all a bit confusing.
Bloodlines is designed to be incorporated with any variation of anything else, which is pretty crazy.
Potentially to its detriment, but...
Yeah. But I'm excited to hear how you got on with this, because I haven't even played the 6-player version of Uprising.
Sure, so just in case you've not heard of Dune, it's a deck building worker placement. Each player has their own unique player power. The cards you draft within the game have multi-use, either for placing workers, gaining an ability, or at the end of the round, cashing them in to buy additional cards and improve your combat. Players take turns going around, placing the workers, gaining whatever resources they need, water, spice, solari, which are the money in the game, gaining influence with the different factions in order to score enough points to eventually end the game and hopefully come out ahead after you've done your sort of secret objective scoring to it. So I hadn't played Uprising until last week, maybe a week before, and we played 3-player Uprising game, and it was great. Right, so spies were new in Uprising, and spies allow you to either get a small bonus from drawing a card when you go to that spot and remove them, or they let you remove them in order to take an action space that another player has already used this turn. And that was life-changing. That's what that one was. I think every worker placement game should have spies and have this mechanism where if somebody's taking your action, you have some way of still getting it. So if it was critical to your plan, you could have set it up in a previous turn or even the turn you're in, and still be able to get that action, albeit at a cost.
Agricola Spy Expansion.
Agricola Spy Expansion, I would play that.
It's horticultural espionage.
I'm absolutely down. Better than zombies. Anyway, but that's first been playing Uprising. I have played the base game with... So, does X have the technologies? Yes.
Rise of X's technologies, yeah.
What does Immortality add?
The oh god, what are they called? The blending cards.
Oh, the Dreadnoughts.
No, the Dreadnoughts are in X. Right. Immortality adds the 2 purple tracks and the second deck of cards.
I would say that Uprising is a better out-of-the-box experience than base game and X. Yeah. I'm not really including Bloodlines. I don't play Bloodlines that much.
I would say the same.
Yeah, because the technologies in X can sometimes be a bit swingy. I find depending on what's on top when it's your turn, when you want to do a green action anyway, can matter. But that's... Anyway, I had a really good time playing Uprising for the first time, and those spies are a game changer. Yeah. So after playing it...
So you didn't find the worms too problematic?
The worms are inconsequential.
What? No, they're huge.
They're absolutely inconsequential.
Why?
1 extra point in combat.
But they double your rewards from combat.
Oh, no, that made absolutely no difference. The player that went in on the hooks and the worms, despite coming first or second in many combats, no, didn't make any difference.
Huh, that's wild.
Because the additional part is, of course, with the combat scoring in Uprising, where you have to get the pair of cards.
Yeah, for a point.
For the point.
Yeah.
which made a huge difference as well, because you could let them have a win and still not get a point.
Yeah, sure.
At times. So no, we found worms were so in that 3-player game.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, a couple of times players got pretty strong rewards. Right, doubling first or second was well worth it for them. But I never got a hook until, I don't know, like the second last turn, and I never got a worm once, and I still won the game. Now, whether that says something to the skill of my opponents, perhaps, but it just wasn't. It wasn't a factor in our game, and it also wasn't a factor in the 6-player game. So I'll come on to that one now. So 6-player alliance, you've got your 4 normal players, just as if you're set up for a 4-player game. But then at one end, you've got the Muad'Dib, who has a special board and special PCs for themselves. And at the other end is the Emperor, who has a special board and special PCs for themselves. And instead of a normal agent as the Emperor or Muad'Dib, you have to nominate another player on your team using a special token for the person to your left, the person to your right, who's going to pick up any rewards you can't receive. So there's things that you don't get as the Emperor or Muad'Dib, and that could be you don't have any direct influence in the combat. So if you gain any fighters, or you want to move anybody into the combat, you are picking one of your teammates to get those cubes and to decide whether they're putting fighters in to the combat. If you get... What else don't you get as the Emperor or Muad'Dib that you might pick up? Oh, influence with the factions. The only influence board you interact with is your own. So if you get one influence with the Bene Gesserit, that's going to one of your teammates. So you can push them further up the tracks, which unlocks points. As you play, your board has special actions that are just for you. But again, when you go to them, you're still nominating a teammate to receive any bonuses that you can't obtain.
So are you still placing agents and building decks?
Yeah, you don't have a little meeple for your agent. Instead, you've got a token that points to your left or right.
Mm-hmm.
Or later on, when you unlock your Swordmaster, you've got a token that points at both.
Right.
So that can be pretty strong. And the Swordmaster, it's worth noting, in 6-player is a one-time use. So that you don't get a third agent for repeated use. You get a one-time third agent.
And that's true for the other players as well?
Yes.
Oh, interesting.
So it's still strong because it also unlocks an extra bonus in combat, but it is not... The board will become very crowded with 6 players and 3 meeples at all times. So the difference when you're playing as the Emperor or Muad'Dib is that you are looking at how you can best support the other players, and the table talk has to be at the start. Well, I'm going in on the combat, or I can go in on the combat on this one. Try and not mess me up. But that is all over the table verbal. Like the rules specifically say you're not allowed to show people cards, you're not allowed to communicate via text or whatever. They said, look, whatever your group wants to abide by, but you're not supposed to have secret messages to each other. Any negotiation or any planning is overt and over the table, which is fine. Generally worked fine. If somebody's gone in on the fight heavily the last round, you could either switch, or if somebody's got a good plan to obtain a bunch of cubes this turn and go into the fight, maybe they'll stick with that, and they've got to tell you as the Emperor, this is what you want to do, or as Muad'Dib, this is what they want to do, and then the other players can decide whether they want to try and stop them, or whether that's not a good idea, or you could throw in a wink at the end of it and then switch things up, however you want to do it, but it just has to be over the table. And it works fine. So you're still using up some spaces as the 2 leaders of the factions. We played the narrative, or the best narrative versions. We used the recommended players. So there was Gurney. I was the Emperor, so I can't remember who else was out there. But we had
It'd be Gurney, Paul, and Channy probably.
Yeah, no, it wasn't.
Gurney, Paul.
Oh, it was Jessica, the Reverend Mother.
Jessica. Okay.
Yeah, and then on my side, Emperor. Who's the other Bene Gesserit lady?
Oh, do you mean the Emperor's daughter?
No, the one that they send to what's his face Harkonnen. The younger one.
Oh yeah,
I can't remember. And who's may thy knife trip and shatter? What's his name again?
Oh, Fade Rotha.
Fade, so Fade, his Bene Gesserit lady, and the Emperor, and so that was the story one. And in a 6-player game, the Emperor side cannot get worm hooks. So you saying that the worms are a huge bonus to the rewards. The Emperor side doesn't have that as an option. And on the Muad'Dib side, they cannot. If one of them gets a hook, everybody gets a hook. Is the other one, but the Emperor side can take cards out of the purchase row to a special royal purchase row that only our side can buy.
It's
so
Margot Fenring.
I'm sure it was her.
She's the one that gets a spy.
Yes, she's the one that gets a spy. Really good.
Barry loves those spies.
I love a spy. And so that was it. So that's basically it, right? The game plays out as normal. It does kind of tie you into some ways of playing. Like as the Emperor side, you're never going to break that wall to let them into more fights, right? To let
you're never going to bring down the shield, yeah.
Yeah. It doesn't change too much. So overall, the game just plays out as normal because the Emperor's still deck building. You want better cards because you're also contributing your swords into combat, and you can choose which one of the 2 players on your team get it. You want to be buying the big cards because when you do a big action, you want to be sure you're getting the most bang for your buck and able to swing things in your favour. And as a normal player, as a standard game player with your agents and whatnot, the game doesn't change massively, but you can sometimes get an extra little bonus that you weren't necessarily relying on, you weren't expecting, or something that changes what your next action is going to be before it comes back round to your turn again. So it can be quite good. The game was long. It was 4.5 hours. But part of that is, well, there's 2 reasons for that. One is 6 players, so obviously it's going to take a bit longer. Everybody's got roughly the same amount of actions they could normally do anyway. We weren't super on top of the game. None of us had played so much that we were just banging out our turns in quite the same way. And it's almost impossible to plan for because you've got 5 players before it comes back to you.
Yeah, that's crazy.
So you're coming. You've maybe got an idea at some point during the round, but then that can change before it comes back to you. And so you on our turn, very often you had to reassess the board, and it did just slow things down enough that 2 kegs of beer, were gone through. Maybe that wasn't helping either.
No, what?
It was enough that it really ground the game to a halt. So if we were much better at strategy and knowing what we were planning on doing and what was good at what point, then I think it'd be a bit faster, but I think it would still be a very long game at 6. Like, I don't see you 3 hours, 3.5 hours to get that down. That said, the game was good because the base game's good and you're still playing the game. The Emperor side won 24-21, so at the end, whoever crosses the 10-pointer ends the game or triggers the end condition for the game, and then you add up everybody's score on your team at the end to get the final score. So we won 24-21. Wasn't too much in it, but a couple of those end game scoring cards were pretty useful for us.
I mean, I don't know about a 6-player game, but certainly in a normal game of Dune, a 3-point margin is huge. It's a low-scoring game.
Well, I mean, this is effectively a 1 point difference because that's
Yeah.
the combined for 3 players, right? So 1 point each. So actually, it was the Muad'Dib side that ended the game, and they got up to 11 points, I think, and then their side was dragging behind a little. Otherwise, we were all in the middle. None of us crossed the 10-point mark. At the end, I finished on 9, and that was the highest our side got, but we just had better averages. Yeah, good. Can recommend. What I have seen of people talking about the 6-player game is that it locks you into strategies as a different side, like because you don't have the option for going for worms as the Emperor side, and because you, I don't know, there's some other restriction they were talking about, like it becomes quite samey if you stick to the rules as written, regardless of the player characters that you use. But I don't think that will be super evident for 3 or 4 games at least. Our side managed to get a pretty good, one player had a pretty good technology engine going, so this was one of the Bloodlines expansions which added technologies to green squares. They had a pretty decent spice and technology thing going. The Sardaukar, that's the other thing that the
Bloodlines adds, yeah.
But again, it's Emperor only in 6-player, or Emperor side only in 6-player.
That makes sense.
And that gave us that was where our advantage in combat came from. You're picking up these special powers by paying to have these special soldiers in the fight. And I would say we probably won. It was fairly even, but I think we probably edged it out on the combat. But we didn't edge it out in a way that we were getting good matches. With the set collection part of winning the fights. We were winning the fights, but at points when it wasn't actually that useful to us.
You needed that ornithopter, and you're just getting the Chris knife.
Yeah, pretty much. The couple of wilds that came up, I think the other side beat us too, kind of thing. And then, yeah, sure, they got a couple of good rewards from the worms, which is kind of what you're saying. But that was a little later in the game, and at that point we were able to kind of pay to keep putting our Sardaukar in. So they were getting double the second place rather than the first place towards the end, which probably wasn't as good for them. So again, it didn't seem game breaking.
It's sort of interesting, right? Because I think a lot of, actually, if you look at the combat cards in Uprising, a lot of the second place prizes are better than the first place prizes. I think that's to balance out the worms and the fact that you can get the half a point from every card.
Mm-hmm. I don't know. It was never a problem for me.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've heard people say that they feel like hammering the Fremen spaces to get into the Siege Tabor, to get the Maker Hooks, to start spamming the worms is like a super optimal game-breaking strategy. I've seen it be really good. I've also seen experienced players balance it out just fine. So I don't think...
It is worth noting, none of us at any point went straight in on that.
Yeah, I do think it's more consequential early game if you focus on it.
So it was something that we'd picked up as we were playing normally. I guess as we play a bit more and as we're looking to form strategies, that might be one that people will try.
So overall, you would try the 6-player game again, but the concern is that maybe it's a bit rote in terms of the rules. It beelines people, or not beelines, it limits people into their roles a bit more restrictively than the open game.
Yeah, and again, the time is a concern. I didn't get any additional enjoyment from the types of actions I can do. Indeed, by the time it came round to my turn, often it was just, well, make the most of what you can do and give one of your teammates a bonus as best you can. Mm-hmm. And then when you didn't give them bonuses, of course, they're like, oh, you never give me anything. So shut up. I'm getting a point on my intrigue card for later.
Well, You touched on it there. So, I mean, that's interesting. I do think that's a point well taken, that if the 6-player game massively increases the game length, but doesn't necessarily increase the enjoyment, that's to note. I do think it sounds like an interesting variant of the game that I'd certainly be keen to try. I do note as well that our experiences might be a bit different, because when I play the base game, I throw like all the expansions in there. So my base games tend to run between 3 and 4 hours, which is not that different to what you're describing, but also with less downtime, because I basically only play 4-player. But Bloodlines, we played that version of the game that I'm talking about, my preferred version, which is Uprising plus all expansions. We threw in Bloodlines because Bloodlines comes with sort of all these sort of mini modular parts. It comes with effectively what is a lesser version of the tech track from Ix. And I think it does that because what it wants to do is provide a version of the techs that you can use without the shipping lanes, because people hate the shipping lanes. And I can understand why. They were certainly if you're just playing original base plus Rise of Ix, getting to favor with and I'm going to talk about this game like you all know it, and if you don't, the time codes are in the description, or if you don't care. But if you can get to favor with the Spacing Guild, then you can get 2 steps on the shipping track. And so if you're playing just base with Rise of Ix, getting in on that folded space first round, it's like the opening move, right? Everyone's opening move is folded space. And if you can't take folded space, then you take the lower yellow space on the shipping track, just because being able to trigger the shipping track, especially from the top down, is just so good. So Bloodlines was like, all right, well, people quite like the tech tiles. Barry says he thinks they're a bit swingy. I've not had too much of that problem, but I do appreciate that some are just way more cool than others.
Yeah, there was one of so you separate them into different piles.
3 different piles.
One of those piles just stayed there the whole game because nobody wanted it.
Yeah.
It was, you had to go down one on an influence track to keep it, and just nobody wanted to take it. And if there's a couple like that where people just don't need it or don't want it or aren't in a position to take it.
Well, what you could do is you could. So I don't know if you've played with with the family nukes from Immortality.
No.
So Immortality adds a tiny module called Family Nukes, which is just a token everybody gets, and once per game you can trade in your family nukes to clear the Imperium row. It's just a way of stopping the market getting blocked with shitty cards, and that's all it is. And actually, a lot of people have just taken those tokens and just put them in the base game, like they should have been in the base game from the start. And so you could just house rule it, like when you use your family nukes, you can sack off some of the technology tiles too. I don't see why that would be a problem. It's really just to stop the markets getting gunged up. But
yeah.
But so the Bloodlines adds a way to play with those technology tiles without using the shipping track that people have mixed feelings about. I found with Uprising and the Rise of Ix expansion, the shipping track is less appealing. It feels more balanced. So I have less of an issue with it in that configuration. But the sort of the major additions of Bloodlines are all the new playable characters, plus the Sardaukar, which are these special warriors that you can purchase. They're distributed to a bunch of spaces on the board, and when you take the action, you can pay 2 credits to take the Sardaukar, and it goes into your garrison. And you also get to draft a tile from the offering. And there's like 5 face-up tiles, and there's special powers for your Sardaukar commandos. And then you put the tile face-up in front of you, and now whenever your Sardaukar is in the battle, in the conflict, that tile is active. And it's usually something that triggers during your reveal step or the combat step. So, it's the timing's very simple on it. Check to see if Sardaukar is fighting, then get the benefit. And what's kind of cool about the tiles is they're not linked to the Sardaukar soldiers, so it kind of incentivizes you to get more than one. So if you get 2 Sardaukar soldiers, you have 2 tiles, and they'll both trigger even if you've just 1 Sardaukar in the fight. But those Sardaukar are fighting, and then they'll die, and they'll go back to your supply. And if you want to put them back in your garrison, they operate just like a normal unit. You can move them around from your supply to your garrison to the conflict whenever you trigger that with normal troops. But if you move them from the supply to the garrison, you have to pay the 2 credits again. So it's just like a soldier that you have to keep paying to trigger these unique little benefits that they've got. It was a nice little addition. I liked that the Sardaukar were represented. I liked the models they provided. So I'm happy with that little mini expansion, but it's not like I didn't, because I always play with Rise of X anyway. The technology track stuff was whatever. The Sardaukar stuff was very small but nice. The extra characters were welcome. They're actually, one of the things I really liked was that it just gives you more variant conflict cards. And if you play the epic game with both expansions, to make up the level 3 conflict cards, you have to put in the level 3 conflict card from Rise of X, which introduced the epic mode. Or is it Immortality that introduced the epic mode? I can't remember. Anyway, there's one card that comes with the expansion that for conflict level 3 that introduced that epic mode. So you have to have all of the cards in there. And I think it breaks down a bit in Uprising because it's just got straight points on it. It's just this really powerful economic card that just has straight points on it. So I'd prefer to remove it, but there's no alternative to use. And now, thanks to Bloodlines, there is. And I really appreciate that. So we played Uprising with all 3 expansions, and I enjoyed it just as much as I do the normal ones. I don't think it adds any more unnecessary overhead. It's great. I still love the game. I'm always happy to play this one.
Yeah, it's very good. My strats for Dune are either to push super hard for the end, get there before anybody can touch me. I mean, great strat anyway, right? But what happens is if I don't get there, I run out of juice. And then I just watch as people go past me.
This is
for that final couple of rounds. So.
This is the opposite of my strategy, which is to always focus too much on deck building. But then if nobody wins quickly, I then have a killer deck and can accelerate into the end game. So I think we would have a really fun game of Dune Imperium.
Actually, I think that's probably why we won as the Emperor's side. All 3 of us got our seat on the council, on the High Council, before any of the other side did. And so our ability just to grab better cards was...
Always got to get that valuable. High Council seat.
Yeah. I think I may be better as the Emperor dishing out a bit of cash. Or gaining cash. Which, makes sense. Thematically.
Well, I was playing, so we're playing the epic game at Airecon. 4 players, of course. Everyone's played before and knows the game well. But 1 player hadn't played the expansions. So I gave them the overview and everything, and they were super across it. They picked it up really quickly. But we were also playing the epic game, and going into the final sort of stretch, the end game, they forgot that the epic game triggers off 12 instead of 10 points. And I think when you're playing with all the expansions, you kind of need to do the epic game because, and I mean, it's still just 11 points you're playing because at 4 everyone starts on 1 anyway. But it just gives it that sort of like little extra mileage to sort of deliver on all the stuff you're building throughout the course of the game. But they did forget that we were triggering off of 12, and they built this just really lean deck that just kept hitting me with like this giant worm card with all the swords on it. And I was like, oh my God. So going into this sort of surprise final round, I was like watching their deck and discard, and they were just I could see them desperately trying to cycle the deck back to that worm. And there was a very real chance they were going to be able to do it. And I was like, basically, I'm going to win this if they don't get that worm card. And if they do, I'm screwed. So it was really exciting. A nice tense ending. But yeah, they built a really good thin deck because they just kept playing that worm card over and over again. Oh, I was like, how do you have that again? It's like, I only got like 8 cards in my deck. God.
That'll do it.
That'll do it.
Dune Imperium. Top drawer.
There's a reason why 2 copies of the game are in the top 15.
Yeah, that is true.
The big finale.
Pièce de la Resistance.
It's Galactic Cruise from Kinson Key Games. Have you seen this? Did you back it? Are you at all excited about it?
I didn't back it. I do want to play it. I believe it's quite good. It looks, the theme for a dry game is seems to not be so bad. But no, I didn't back it, and I don't particularly regret not backing it. But I would like to.
Right. So here's my. So it's a 2025 release. It was a Kickstarter campaign that's just delivered this year. It's a 1 to 4 player game. It says 90 to 2.5 hours. It's heavy. So that really depends on your familiarity with sort of heavy Euro games and things like that. It says here 3.93 out of 5. That's probably pretty fair. I would class it as like a sort of a lighter weight level Lacerda. So you're talking about the sort of the Gallerist level Lacerda. The designers are TK King, Dennis Northcott, and Cotlin Thompson. This is Dennis's first game. Cotlin and TK King released a game a number of years ago called Delivirus, which I don't know anything about and doesn't seem to be in wide distribution, so I haven't encountered it. The artist is Ian O'Toole, which everyone will know. Ian O'Toole has done all the Lacerda games, does a lot of work for Eagle Griffin Games, who published those. They did the Iron Rail series from Capstone Games, the little train game series. They also did Voidfall from Mind Clash and the new edition of Ra from Century Games. But Ian O'Toole has done many, many, many games. And the publisher is Kinson Key Games. And in this country, actually, it was distributed by Dranda Games. So there was quite a lot of like collabs for various distributions around the world. Kinson doesn't have wide distributions. I think it is the designer's company. And this might even be their first or second game under that publisher. So, I mean, I think, the short elevator pitch for this is like, number one, do you like Lacerda games? If you hate Lacerda games, I'm pretty sure you're not going to like this. But, it also depends on what you've played. This is considerably lighter than, say, an On Mars or, even his heavier games like...
Well, the only Lacerda I've played is Inventions.
Right, which is unhelpfully one I haven't played. Yeah. Or Weather Machine
so
is the other one I was going to say.
4.68 out of 5 on Board Game Geek. I enjoy it. I don't want to play it 1 or 2 player because the bots are a pain to run. But 3 player, 4 player, more than happy to play. However, the people I thought would like to play it with me do not.
Interesting.
Like it. Not because it's not that they don't like it. It's just they're idiots.
Okay. Fair enough.
No, it's the theme isn't great, right? In terms of how it actually what your actions are to what you're doing. The theme is there, but you got to stretch for it, and it makes the actual actions harder to grok than it necessarily might need to be. And they didn't see the flow of the game from my explanation and from them playing it.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like if they gave it another couple of goes, they might like it, but there's many other games, so why punish yourself playing something you're not going to enjoy for a couple of times?
Yeah. So the Galactic Cruise is like I said, one of these sort of lighter weight Lacerda level games, and it is a game of sort of, I guess functionally what you're doing is, thematically what you're doing is building spaceships to take tourists on a galactic tour of space. And it's Galactic Cruise, literally a cruise ship, but space. And so you're building your cruise ships and then you're sending them off around the stars, and then they're coming back, and you will primarily earn your points from doing the Galactic Cruises. I think you will be hard pressed to earn a lot of points via any other means. But you could earn points by running the cruises a lot, or you could focus on building epic cruise ships and make that more your thing. Mm-hmm. But it is relatively accessible for a heavy Euro. I think that there's a lot of like low-level heuristics that it has in common with other Euros that would make it quite accessible. And so my takeaway is, if you like this sort of heavy Euro game, or you like the ones that are sort of on the more accessible end of the spectrum, you'll probably enjoy this. There's quite a bit of rules overhead still, and there's still quite a few things that, bits that you need to remember and things like that. The rulebook is not bad. Mark had previewed this back when the Kickstarter campaign was on, so we had a little bit of a head start, but we pretty much learned it from the rulebook. It did take quite a long time to do that and play the game, but we did manage to play it correctly and see sort of what the game had to offer. I don't think it does anything so miraculously innovative that if you're burned out on these sorts of games, or you're sitting on a pile of Lacerdas you haven't explored yet, or other heavy Euro games, like the Board and Dice T series, or, Nucleum or something like that, which is also Board and Dice, or your Certseas, your Mind Clashes. There's nothing, I think, in here that's going to be like, changing your mind about the genre or the weight of the game. However, it is very smooth. Certainly for first design, it feels like, it's all of it makes sense. The game flows well. It's understandable. It is a series of sort of little logistical hoops that you have to run through. There is a strong timing element because the players sort of have agency over the end of the game. There is a series of, the game is length is controlled by a series of progress boards that fill up every time someone runs a cruise. And so the more people are running cruises, the more these fill up, and the rate of cruises escalates over the course of the game. So there's a really sort of nice tension and escalating sense into the end game. This is exactly the kind of game that sort of fits my brain. Like, it's not my favorite genre, but it's something that I'm particularly good at. And so I can sort of see the puzzle and I can understand what's going on, and it was nice. I'm not sure if I feel necessarily compelled to go out and buy it, and then there are the expansions as well, which add just a small amount of extra complexity. But it's worth noting as well that what the expansions do is they just add variant ship parts. So you actually sub in and out the expansions. So you can't sort of play with all expansions at once because they're modular. Not modular, they're variants for the same thing. But at its core, so here's that was the short pitch. Here's the slightly longer pitch. It's going to be a 2 to 3 hour game, probably more. We played 3 players, and it was definitely more than that, albeit we all were learning together. The game itself is, functionally it's worker placement. You start with 3 workers. You're going to be taking actions on a board. I'm not going to explain the whole game. It'd be way too much, but I'm going to give a very high level overview, because what you want to do is sort of accomplish the major task of building cruises and then running cruises. And in order to build the cruises, you have to acquire the tiles to put into the ship. You start with a top and a bottom. Each ship is a top, a bottom, and a number of rooms in between. The max is 3 unless you unlock the capacity for more rooms using various things you can do. There's all kinds of unlockable player powers and asymmetric player powers, and building up bonus points by visiting the same planets over and over, and all this kind of stuff. You get, like, every time you run a cruise, you can take a bonus tile and get a unique bonus now, and then also invest that to get a passive bonus forever in the future on a certain planet. Anyway, there's a lot going on, right? And lots of sort of options for you to do that sort of thing. But functionally, you're building the spaceships. You start with a top and a tail. You're going to build out that spaceship. You can get more tops and tails, but every top you take is worth -5 points unless you run a cruise with the ship. So the first cruise you do with the ship flips the top over, and now it's worth bonus points at the end of the game. So you don't want to be trying to just grab all these different tops and bottoms without plans to run those cruises as well. So logistically, you have to get the rooms, put the rooms in the ship. You have to then amass resources like fuel and oxygen and things to run the cruise. You also have to chart a course to run the cruise, and ideally fill that course with passengers. But you don't need to get the passengers preemptively. It just helps. You can secure passengers when you launch. And so you're putting workers onto these worker placement spaces. And what's kind of interesting about the spaces is there's also a mechanism where you can upgrade gears on your player board, which does wonders for your resources. And then they go into these development spaces, giving you player powers, or you can put them on the action spaces where they link actions. And so you can go into one space and take actions from both linked spaces. And that's also gives you massive flexibility. Although it's worth noting that I scored incredibly well in our game, and I didn't actually really do that very much. So I don't know how important it is. But when I say incredibly well, I don't mean in the context of everyone that's ever played this game, of course. I just mean, I think, for a first time. Your turn is going to be one of two things. Place the worker to line up all these things you need, the resources, the star charts, the passengers, get the blueprints, build the rooms, all of those things. You know, it's a standard sort of like heavy Euro logistics puzzle. Or instead you do a launch. And when you do a launch, you launch one of your ships into space. It's going to fly off, and you get to put. You have to put one of your workers on it. Oh yeah, that's the other thing. When you've run out of workers, you have to do a recall turn, which is a bummer. But then you get a bunch of bonuses and incomes and things, so it's nice. It's it doesn't feel like your standard miss a go. You can also trigger a bonus action from those linked actions I spoke of earlier. So that's cool. But then you launch the ship, and then what's going to happen is you've got your star chart and your little worker that you've sent off to fly the ship, which you now don't have. So you're going to have to do those recovery turns more often until you get them back. The worker from space who's flying the cruise. They're going to walk along the star chart at the beginning of your turn. Every cruise you have in space, the worker will advance a step and you'll get some nice bennies. So a passive income at the start of your turn functionally. So it's, and so you can run lots of little cruises. Like you can just hammer out a couple of small cruise ships and send them off on their way. The bigger they are, the more passengers they can hold, the more sort of multipliers and benefits they get. Or you can like try to build these big cruise ships, or even try to unlock the 4-room cruise ships early on and do mega cruises. And yeah, it's really nice. We played it at 3. I didn't feel like the downtime was a problem. I was always sort of looking and thinking about what was going on and keeping an eye on things. There's quite a few times where someone would look up from what they were thinking about and go, "Hey, who took that thing?" Which I love. I love those moments. The thing I wanted is gone, and a lot of sort of like, "Oh, if I do this, I can do that, and then if I do this, I can do that, and then if I do this, I can." Oh no, it doesn't work. Shit, which also I love. So all those good moments from your sort of heavy logistics Euro puzzles. I thoroughly enjoyed the game. I definitely think it's a nice, sort of entry into your lighter heavyweight Euro games. But I think whether or not you have the crowd for this. And I do wonder about replayability. At a granular level, there's a lot of variety in there. At a high level, I think it's going to kind of feel the same every time. Mm-hmm. But I've only played the once, and I'd happily play again. And worth noting as well that the actual presentation is excellent. I mean, we did play with Mark's All-In edition, which has all the deluxe components and the neoprene mat and everything, which is always very pleasing. But just on the, I don't know, even the core game, just the basic set seems great. And of course, you've got your Ian O'Toole iconography, which is all relatively intuitive and straightforward. There is one thing that's really easy to miss, which is after you launch, you have to refill the passengers who are in the waiting rooms. Everyone drops down and you put more out. Don't forget to do that. It's really easy to miss, but it's that tiny little red splotch at the top of the launch track. That's what that's telling you to do.
Take your word for it.
You'll have to. Anyway, I hope you get a chance to play it. It'll be interesting to hear what you think of it.
I mean, nobody I know is on this one at this point, but plenty of opportunities to play games. And, it's not too long until various conventions either.
True story. Well, I think if you like, Kanban EV, if you like Lisboa, if you liked, the Gallerist, if you like Nucleum, if you like Tawantinsuyu, which is a strange one to call up. I'm just trying to think of sort of heavy Euros that aren't Lacerdas, but have that sort of feel of managing a logistics puzzle and these sorts of elements, If you like any of those sort of T games from Board and Dice, overall, I think you'll like this. It definitely doesn't feel like the more sort of very German heavy Euros, really. But yeah, I think So if you've had a chance to try those, I think you'll like this one.
All right. Wow. Successful gaming had by both of us, I think.
I completely agree.
Many more to come.
Oh, I'm giving up, actually, Barry. I'm retiring. That was
Is
it.
that done? Done and done. It'll be podcast 26 next time, Mike.
Oh my God, what's that mean?
A bi-weekly schedule. Surely that will be our 1 year anniversary.
Oh my God, we should do something special.
I'm having a cake.
Great, me too. Oh, I can't have cake, actually. I'm diabetic.
Sad.
Sad. I'll have a piece of bread with some jam on
it. Enjoy that.
It'll be a nice treat. All right, well, that's it for us, everyone. I hope you've got some wonderful games planned, and so we'll be back in 2 weeks to talk about more games and celebrate our 1 year of podcasting. Thanks to everyone who's come on the journey with us, who supported the show. Thanks to Barry, who's come along and co-hosted with me in every episode, which is wild. And thanks to the patrons who support the channel and help us bring you this content as well.
Until next time, bye.